Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, and hello. I have been recently called the Tellius lore expert. I don't think that that's, I feel a little embarrassed by that title, but I wanted to do a tier list. I think that that's a fun little way of just talking about my thoughts on each individual character. So maybe, I wanted to do some unfiltered, unscripted, off-the-cuff yapping on this channel, in between these big scripted videos that take me a while to make. So this one is the first one I'm doing, and I've already recorded all of it, and I will tell you it is very long. So, obvious disclaimer, this, just to set the expectations right off the bat, this is based off of who I like the most. This isn't based off of which characters I think are the best. So, there are characters that kind of don't have a ton of screen time, like Heather, who are going to be in memorable, really love. So, my tiers are favorites, memorable, really love. I could talk about them forever, and I did. Really like, I think they're fantastic. Great. I think they're great. This will be a mix of plot characters that I have a few caveats with, as well as simpler characters that I'm like, I like them for some reason. This is probably where Ileana's gonna be. I like them. I probably could like them more, or I could like them less. To give an example, Heather is in memorable, really love. She's in the second highest tier. I have way more to say about Ashnard, but he's in like, because I have less of a reason to like him, but he's a very interesting character. And then we get to the bottom tiers. And these characters, if they're your favorite character, great. This is just going to be my off-the-cuff opinion of all of these characters. And I have something to say about almost every single one of them. So I hope that this is an interesting video. I am going to be talking about every single one. And in the comments, why don't you tell me who your favorite characters are? So, I'm going to start out with the most boring characters first, to avoid spoilers for my friend, who's still playing it right now. So, to start us out, let's go with probably the most nothing character. Let's start us out with Largo. No opinion. I have no opinion on Largo. I recently reread all of the Path of Radiance supports for my timeline video, because there were actually some supports that I have never read that contain slightly critical information. Crazy. So I reread it, and I remember my eyes just glazing over reading Largo's, and I was like, wow. This is truly just, if you wanted to create a very generic Axe character in a Fire Emblem game, you got him. He's Largo. It's so boring that they were like, we need to make at least one person who is playable in Path of Radiance, not playable in Radiant Dawn, for reasons. And they decided to just cut his arm off screen, and, he just owns a restaurant now, a tavern, and that's about it. What I do find interesting about Largo, so, maybe he's in like a high no opinion, is that I do like his relationship with Khalil a lot. And Khalil's a character that I have a much higher opinion of. And I think this might be kind of unfair. It ends up like raising my opinion of Khalil, but not really raising my opinion of Largo too much. Because I think that their relationship is very sweet, and I like seeing married couples part of the playable cast in Fire Emblem games. Which has not happened, obviously, in a long time. So I think that that's really sweet. And I like that they, I think that their story and everything is very sweet. But on the flip side, I just don't think Largo's a very interesting character, and there's nothing to really say about him. So, that's Largo. He's our first character on the board. Let's go with another character that I don't really have much to say about him, but we're gonna put him higher. Gifka. We're gonna put him great. Gifka's a great character, actually. I think for a character that does not really talk much and doesn't really have a backstory besides just he's King Kennegus' shadow, I think Gifka's great. I like his character design a lot. Both transform and untransformed. When he's transformed, he's a massive black lion, and that's cool as fuck. Untransformed, I really like his design. I think he's very handsome. The thing about Gifka, though, that does raise him, and that didn't really raise Largo, is that I do actually really like his relationship with Kennegus. Probably because it is about as explicit as they could be at the time. Those lions are gay. You know, Kennegus's heir is his nephew, and he's never said to be married, except that he has a, quote, shadow who never leaves his side, and that he grew up with, and they live the rest of their lives together after the war. What? Okay, so those lions are gay. It's really rare to see, like, two bears in a relationship in a video game. And they're lions, but like bears. Gay bears. That raises Gifka quite a bit. I think his design's cool. The little he speaks, he seems like an interesting character. I think the Tellius recollection was pretty explicit. Like, Gifka has nothing in particular that he likes. So I'm like, I can't really raise him higher than this, but I think Gifka's cool. I would love to see him in Fae. Kennegus, I'm gonna put him in really like. I think that he's like the paragon of like a character that kind of only exists for a specific role. I don't know. There's really nothing bad you can say about Kennegus. He's very polite. I like his backstory with Ike's dad. He's very noble. He treats Ike and the rest of the party, and especially Lincia, with a lot of kindness despite their situation and the fact that he can't really help very much. Saying, I can't do much, but, this is what I can do for you. Very sweet. I really like Kennegus. I love his voice in Fire Emblem Heroes. They picked a perfect voice for him. Yeah, I think there's really Kennegus is just a cool guy, so we're gonna put him in really like. Let's put Neolucci. I'm starting out with all the old men. Let's put Neolucci in no opinion. It's slightly better than, you know what? Or cool. You're cool. No opinion or you're cool. Say it's gonna be a small tier in my opinion, so we'll just group them all here. Neolucci's cool. I like that he is very protective of Nisala, and he keeps calling him like his baby name. And that's about it. He doesn't have supports, and you can only use him for a couple of chapters before the end of the game. I think for an old man character, he's not annoying. To continue our old man with no supports streak, here's Nolan. Nolan's cool. I think that Nolan kind of rides on his aura alone here, that he's kind of cool. One, people always forget he's the leader of the Dawn Brigade. He's literally the leader. It's not Micaiah. Nolan is the leader of the Dawn Brigade, which is even more annoying that Soth took his spot on the last Fire Emblem Heroes banner, because that should have been Nolan. Nolan should have been a 5-star character with his axe. I don't remember what it's like. Tavros, I think. Tadros? Something like that. Nolan should have been 5-star. Anyway, Nolan is the leader of the Dawn Brigade, and he doesn't get supports, but I do think all of his interactions are, I think, I don't know. I don't know how else to say it. I just think Nolan's cool. He's like one of the few characters that doesn't fall off for me as the game progresses, which is something that Edward and, Leonardo cannot say. They're not, they're Edward and Leonardo. I can usually squeak out some pretty good stats for Nolan and keep using him. I don't know, he's just kind of a handsome, quiet man, and that's enough. That's enough. Nolan's cool. It's Nolan. What else am I really supposed to say? Well, should I put the other two main members of the Dawn Brigade? Okay, we'll do the other two one. That's too high. I'm gonna move them down. I'm sorry. Nolan and Leonardo kind of lack the cool factor, and I can't put them any higher. Their backstory, Leonardo's backstory especially is like kind of crazy, but it's only in the art book that released like 10 years later. So Edward, cool. I like that he got really good art in Fae. I don't know, the Dawn Brigade is kind of balanced by 3 very young characters and 2 very old characters, but then they just keep getting young characters, so it kind of like skews them down to it's like Nolan, Makai are babysitting them all. But it makes sense with the situation going on. We're gonna put Liar and Like, but we're gonna put Kiza in Great. I'm biased. I really like Kiza. I can't really say why. I like their design. I love the voice that they got in Heroes. I always end up using them. I think it's hilarious that they have a massive crush on Ranulph. For some reason, I keep forgetting Ranulph is like one of the highest members of Gallia's military. I keep forgetting that for some reason. To me, I'm like, Ranulph is like a guy, and Kiza and Liar are like the 2 people under him. So they're kind of high in the military, and I keep forgetting about that because Gallia's military structure isn't super formal. Liar, I think, is just funny more than anything. I think that she's a really good contrast to Leith, who I'm not going to talk about yet because I have more thoughts about Leith. But yeah, I just think they're both cool. I have the Kiza plus 10 in Heroes, and I think Liar's like plus 7 or something. Like, it's like super high for a 4-star. But yeah, I don't really have an explanation other than I think they're funny. I don't know. It feels kind of bad to put Liar above the Dawn Brigade, but I don't know. Liar's funny. I like her. Heather's really high for a character with 0 supports and not a lot of plot presence. She's funny. I love her design. She is the first explicitly lesbian character in the entire series. I don't know. I think that the fact that they're so open about it, and the fact that that old rhetoric, like, there's that staff sort of user-submitted, like, online staff interview where they're like, oh my god, was Heather abused by a man? I can treat her better. And the staff member was like, no, Heather doesn't have a history of abuse with men. She just likes women. She was born that way. And I don't know, that's still really radical to me. So Heather's really high. I really love Heather. I think she's a fantastic character. She doesn't have a lot of story presence, but every time she shows up, she makes me laugh. I love her design. I wish she had more usage so I could use her more. But she's great. I love her. Wish she wasn't in a game where Soth was required for every endgame map that she's in, so I couldn't, like, why use 2 thieves? But no, Heather's great. I love Heather. Heather's great. She's awesome. Okay, another character without supports. Sigrun. She's gonna be really high. I'm biased. Sigrun's great. Is this Sigrun or Sigrun?
I am Sigrun, and suddenly a bride, it seems.
Oh, Sigrun. Her name is Sigrun. Okay, Sigrun, really high. It's honestly just that I love her design. I think she's pretty. I really like her supports with, not supports. Well, yeah, because Sigrun and Tanith have, like, custom talk dialogue if they have an A support. So, yeah, it's pretty explicit that Tanith has a huge crush on Sigrun. And their paired endings are like Ferdinand Hubert before Ferdinand Hubert. One of them is very gentle and sweet and patient with people, and the other person's like, get out of my fucking way if you can't work. If you can't make it work, if you can't make it work in this army, get out of the way. I do love that dynamic. So, they were Ferdinand Hubert before Ferdinand Hubert. So, Sigrun's high. I'm going to put Tanith high. I can't remember her supports very well. I do remember that they were good. I mean, I like that she was like, my cooking is so bad. I know a lot of people find that trope tiring. I think it's very funny. Especially when Tanith is like, I almost killed the top generals of Benion's army, and you're like, that's really funny. So, You know, there's a lot of bias at play here, but I love Sigrid and Tanith. They're great. I love their designs. I like that Tanith is a Pegasus Knight who wears mostly black. That's cool as hell. Yeah, Sigrid and Tanith. I gotta put them high. I can't put them any lower. Speaking of characters that have supports, but I'm gonna put Mia in really like. I really like Mia. I mean, there's not really much to her character. I'm going to be honest. But I don't think I can put her any lower. I know some people really hate her. She's just a sword girl. She's got a great design. She swings her sword. She doesn't swing it very hard. She's super weak. Her strength stat is pretty bad. And so is her constitution and weight. So you have to invest a lot to make Mia good. But Mia is a fun, cute character. I really like her. She's pretty. I love her voices. I think she's gotten 3 voices in Heroes, and they're all good. Lonnie Manila, I wish she was not recast. Phyllis Sampler, I think she was super talented. Rest in peace. I really liked her work in various things over the years. And then Anyako, I really, really love Anyako's voice for her. I think that works super well for her. It was cute with the baby and then the baby version. And then we heard her with, I think the Resplendent came out first. I really, really like her take on older Mia. It honestly sounds a lot like Lonnie Manila and Phyllis Sampler's interpretations, but you know, it's her own interpretations, and fantastic. It makes me like the character even more. She's got a really cute design. I've been commissioned to draw her a few times, and it's a joy to draw her. She's a fun design. She's really popular. I can't complain about it. I think she's cute. So, Mia, I really like. She's gonna be put here. Well, if I did Mia, I should do Ilyana, right? Right here. Ilyana's great. I think she's funny. She's got one gimmick. It's pretty funny most of the time. She's got a cute design, and it's fucking funny that she's busted in Radiant Dawn, and she's the character who's on the most amount of maps. That's funny. That's just funny. So if you level Ilyana up, she can be the most busted, and there's an entire map in Endgame dedicated to how good she can be. That's funny. I've never used her, but I just think that's funny. She also got some really good cipher cards. For a character with, like, one sort of gimmick, she earns her keep. I think she's pretty. I do think that she probably is one of the characters that stands out the most design-wise, in an odd way, but I like Ilyana. I think she's great. Should I do the Archer boys next? Rolf. I'm gonna put him in great. I've used him in both Radiant Dawn and Path of Radiance multiple times. He's never fallen off. Rolf is Rolf. He's the trainee character, and he is the trainee character of all time. So every single time he's been busted for me because I put in the work for him, and it's paid off. Rolf is great. Shinon-Hu. Even in Radiant Dawn. That being said, I think Rolf also benefits from being in my favorite support in Path of Radiance. One of them, top 3 supports, is his support with Tornado. I've never seen that before, just because the odds of deploying Tornado in Path of Radiance is extremely low. I love to see the statistics of people who actually deploy him. Kind of like how we saw the deploy statistics for 3 Houses. I want to see the deploy statistics for Path of Radiance. I want to see the, 0.1% for Tornado. Really low. It sucks because Tornado has, in my opinion, one of the best, this is going to be a Tornado thing. Let me push that to the side. Because Tornado's usage is so low, you really wouldn't read his supports without, using him or looking it up. Look him up. Look up his support with Rolf. It's so good. And yeah, because Rolf is in that support, my opinion of Rolf is really high. He also has one of my favorite base conversations in Radiant Dawn. The one with his biological mother, that one's crazy good. That one's really good. So, yeah, Rolf is going to be in great. I could probably put him up higher, but my personal affection for him isn't very low because he's just like a 10-year-old kid, 13 in Radiant Dawn. He's a baby. I just, I don't really think about him too much. But, I like Rolf. He's great. Let's do his brothers. Oscar. We're gonna put him in like. I think he is just less interesting. I don't know. Oscar's just a guy. I think that he is a very nice guy, but he is kind of like the straight man to a fault. I think that he needs to be to balance out Rolf and Boyd's personalities. And it's kind of nice that he's like one of them, like, calmest, most serious members of the Grail Mercenaries, similar to Rhys. I usually end up using him in Radiant Dawn a little bit. He's definitely strong, puts in the work. I've never gotten him to work in Path of Radiance. I've never. He's not very. I don't know. I've never gotten him to get to like past like level 10. He's also kind of a good balance for Kieran. His support. He's also part of that base conversation I really love in Radiant Dawn. There's literally nothing to dislike about him. I just don't know if my personal affection towards him is very high. So, I don't want to do Boyd just yet because he is, there's another factor to that. So we're going to shelf Boyd. You know what? I'll mention him later. We're going to put Boyd in like. He should be higher. I have some caveats. Let's move on. We'll do Rhys. So Rhys, I'm going to put him in like. No. I'm going to put him in great. Yeah, I think Rhys is great. I'm inclined to think he's kind of low. I'm like, oh, yeah, he's fine. But the Rhys is a character that the more I think about him, the more I like. I think that I don't think I've ever promoted him, which is kind of unfortunate because apparently he's a really good white mage. I think Rhys is really sweet. I like his supports with me and Titania. His support with Ulki is fantastic. Wow. Yeah, Path of Radiance is probably the game the most, probably next to Engage, where like the supports that you with the people that you expect them to put them with, like fellow retainers and like family members, aren't very interesting. The supports with like person from a completely different, a deployment time, that maybe you've already benched one of them by then, and you never think to actually put them together unless you really like the character and you want to get all their supports. They're the best. So like Engage had fantastic supports, like I think some of the Solm characters with Furine and Brodia characters, you've probably already benched them by the time you get to Solm. Fantastic supports. Same with Rhys and Ulki. Ulki and Rhys's support is probably one, just like Torneo and Rolf's, some of the best supports in the game. The likelihood of kind of using them both at that point of the game, especially since Rhys kind of gets phased out by Mist being so essential in Path of Radiance. I think his design's cute. I like that he has a Irish name and he's a ginger. I don't know, it makes him actually seem Irish, so that's really cool. His artwork in Heroes is adorable. It's one of the only Kippu male artworks, adult male artworks. It's adorable. It is so cute. It's too bad he was like the fodder guy when he first released because the palm staff was like so meta. Rhys is cute. That inclusion of him on the summer banner I think was like the cutest thing ever because he was like, if my parents could see me now, they'd be so happy that I'm well enough to be able to like take a break on a vacation and I don't have to be in my bed all day. Because, yeah, he is one of the few like chronically ill characters in the series. Like next to like Alfred and stuff. That would be an interesting harmonic if we start doing more male harmonics. It would be Rhys and Alfred. Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, Rhys is cute. I like Rhys. He's cute. Where's Ulki? I'll do him and there we go. I don't know. I like the bird tribes a lot, so they're kind of boosted by that. I think most people would have put him in no opinion. His support with Reese is fantastic. I like that I don't know, I like the Hawk tribe, so he's high. Ulki's just, I like Ulki. I think his design is pretty gnarly, but I like Ulki. Then you get Janif. Radiant Dawn design. Where's the Radiant Dawn design? Oh, is that his pet? We're gonna put Janif a little lower. His support with Shinon is also really fucking funny. It's more likely that you would get them because you kind of recruit them around the same time. It's kind of funny that Shinon's like, I'm like, how old is Shinon? Is he in his late 20s or early 30s? He's like one of the older characters. And like, he gets like babied around by this little guy. I think that that's funny. It's like, I like seeing Shinon suffer. So, other than that, I like the Hawk tribes. I really want to try doing like a Lagoons only run one of these days. And I remember having a ton of fun on that one Radiant Dawn map. Can't remember which one. It was one of the Part 4 maps. And I ended up just like deploying Lagoons in like one Bayork, and it was such a fun map with all the transformation mechanics and all of them, you know, kind of being transformed at different times. It was a really, really fun map to do. They got some great supports. They're Tabarn's friends. I like Janif and Ulki. We'll do Kevin. I like Kevin. I can't really tell you why. You know what? Let me just... There we go. There we go. That one's part of Radiant Dawn when Jeffrey's like, I'm gonna give you this. And he just starts sobbing and says, I'm gonna put this on my mantle. It's gonna be a family heirloom. He's like, I'm literally giving you a powerful weapon so you can use it in the next battle. And he's like, what? What? That's funny. That's really funny. I also prefer his Japanese name. Kevin is a good... He's Kevin. He's a Kevin. He's funny. He's a good unit. I like him. I don't know, like being so low makes it sound like, you know, I don't like them. There we go. There we go. Largo gets his own tier, and it's Largo. Yeah, I like all of these characters. Who else in the Grail Mercenaries? Is there anyone else? Yeah, the rest of these are, like, super plot relevant. We'll do Gatry next. We're gonna put Gatry, no opinion. It's not his fault at all. I just don't want to like Gatry. That's kind of it. He's not a very good unit because this is Radiant Dawn, Path of Radiance. There's no reason to use Knight characters. There are some games where you're like, my Knight character is the best character ever, and that's Conquest. This is Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. There is no reason to use Knight characters if they're not the Black Knight. So, Gatry as a unit sucks. If you use him and you give him a ton of movement skills, and you turn the game movement up high, he's probably pretty good. I'm not willing to do that. So, there might be someone in the comments section. Feel free to tell me why I'm wrong, why Gatry's the best unit. As far as his personality, I can't tell if he defected when Ike took over because he disliked Ike because he was a lot nicer to him later, or if it was just like Shinon kind of telling him what to do. I don't know. Gatry's personality is kind of just weak sauce to me. I don't have a clear read on his personality. I can't tell if he's like, I don't know. He's just a character I'm not willing to kind of examine deeper. I don't like flirty man archetypes. I really don't. It's one of my least favorite character archetypes in Fire Emblem games. I think Inigo is like the only one I've ever liked. Because he's got a lot more going on as a character than just like, I flirt with women. You know, he's got really, I don't know, Inigo's interesting. He's got great supports. I can't say the same about like any other flirty man archetype. I hate Sylvain. I don't like Soleil. Engage thankfully had like 0 of those. I think Fagato was supposed to be, but then they forgot to write him as one, so he's just not a flirty man character. I don't like the characters. It's my least favorite trope. I don't like Varian. Yeah, I don't like Varian. I think Gatry kind of, the thing about him is that he's not successful, so he's just kind of pathetic about it. But that's not interesting. I don't know. Every time he's like trying and failing, it's just like sad. I don't know. I think I'm being unfair, but I just don't care about this trope enough, and I don't think Gatry does enough to make him stand out as a character, to make me like him more. And I do fault him for leaving when Grail died. And, I know mechanically they just didn't want to pre-promote Nike's army. Sure. I don't like how sad Ike was about that. No. So Gatry's not high. I don't think he's bad. I'm just not willing to like Gatry. I think that's what it is. And that's it. I'm not willing to use him. I'm not willing to like him. There's no reason for me to like him. I do like and the other thing is, we're gonna do Shinon next. And this might be veering more into spoiler territory, because I've been trying to avoid that. We're gonna put Shinon in awful. Oh, the thing is, Shinon is like better than awful. Maybe I should make his own tier. Shinon. The thing about Shinon is that he sucks so bad, I think he's funny. Like, the problem is that Shinon is kind of unusual for a Fire Emblem character, and that he kind of unrepentantly sucks so bad. But he's not like the worst guy ever. So like, I'm gonna start putting like, slave owners in this tier. Shinon is not a slave owner, he's just a bigot. But he's like a funny bigot. So I can't even say that like, oh, as a character, I don't understand why anyone would like him. He's a funny guy with a really good stat spread. He's like really good. So the problem with him is that he is in a game where the whole message is, people are racist because they don't understand each other. So when we understand each other, we're going to fight, but like eventually things are going to be okay. Shinon just like never changes. And that's slightly annoying to me. Because on one hand, I'm like, I think it's realistic. Some people are literally just going to be awful people who are otherwise good, and they're never going to change. And you get frustrated, and you're like, why is this person, an otherwise really good person, they're just a total bigot, and they suck. And there's just parts of their life where you get annoyed because you're like, you're never going to be a good person in this aspect. But you're pretty standout in other ways, so I don't understand why you would be so stubborn to keep kind of like this ideology that it's beneath you. So maybe I'm projecting too much into that. The problem with Shinon is that he otherwise is a pretty good character. I like his relationship with Rolf. Again, I'm getting more into spoiler territory. His, that one base conversation in Radiant Dawn when, Shinon's like, Rolf, I want you to be better than me. I don't want you to be just as good as me. I don't want you to stay, worse than me. I don't want you to be my disciple. I want you to be better than me. Like, go out and prove that you're better than me. I think that that's such a great... I really like his relationship with Rolf. I think that that really humanizes him. I think that Shinon would otherwise be a pretty, kind of forgettable character if he didn't have a stat spread and his relationship with Rolf. And I think that Rolf is an interesting character for liking Shinon so much. And that makes Rolf a lot more interesting. So, I think Shinon's design is great. I like his ponytail. His voice in Heroes is also so funny. They cast, like, the perfect voice for him. Because I remember when he first released, people were like, oh, I don't like how high-pitched his voice is. I think that's perfect for him. His ninja alt, when he was like, oh my god, you're so annoying. It's perfect. It's the perfect voice for him. I'm gonna say that I think a lot because I think that most of these characters got really good casting in Heroes. I say most as if there's like an exception. I don't think there's an exception. I think everybody got good voices. Okay, I'm back recording again. I moved Jan and Finolke down. I like them. I think that's where I'd put them. I think having really good, funny supports, isn't enough for me to, like, put them in great. Like, I'm thinking of, I wouldn't put them in the same categories like Rolf and Reese. So I did move Jan and Finolke down. I think being next to Edward and Leonardo is about where I'd put them. So, and to clarify what I was saying about Shinon is that, like, compared to a lot of the other, like, racist characters in this game, Shinon is, I don't know, he seems like the most, like, normal person that you'd meet who's actually, like, racist in, like, real life. In that, like, I don't think he'd commit, like, a hate crime. I don't think he'd do, like, anything like that. He just kind of, I don't know, he's like the racist uncle, is kind of how I'd put it. So, I don't know. As far as, like, this being a tier list of characters I like, I'd put Shinon really far down. I wouldn't put him next to, like, literally people who own slaves in this game, who would be an awful tier. But as far as my personal enjoyment, not high. Not high at all. But, like, if somebody said, oh, Shinon's one of my favorites, I would be like, oh, yeah, there's a lot of reasons to like him. No, I get it why someone would like Shinon as a character. So, that's why he gets his own tier, but, like, it's not like in the I'm going to judge you actively for liking this character. I'd be like, ugh, him? Okay, sure. So, as far as talking about, racist characters go, let's give an example of who belongs in awful tier. Oliver sucks so tremendously that I'm convinced everyone who's, like, really in on, like, the joke that he's, like, a funny character either hasn't played the game or doesn't have a good sense of humor. It's just, Oliver's just actively bad. He's such an actively bad character, and it's such a mistake making him playable in Radiant Dawn. So, Oliver is awful. And while I'm at it, I'm going to add all of his fellow senators, who are all terrible people. I get various degrees of enjoyment out of, like, some of these characters. No, they're actively, like, awful characters. And I can appreciate how cartoonishly evil they are, because of, like, there are cartoonishly evil people in real life. So, like, some of them are a little more cartoonish than the rest, but, no, I mean, I think they make good villains. There's just really no reason to like them. And that's about it. So, I think we're in proper spoiler territory now. So I am going to start putting, I think I'm going to start putting the rest of the Girl Mercenaries on the board. Favorites, Ike. Ike is, I don't know how to really describe Ike. I think that he's just the ideal main character, if that makes sense. Like, when I think of good protagonists, Ike is, like, in the top, like, 5 protagonists of all time. And I think it's interesting because I feel like he is, like, the ideal protagonist for this world. When I think of, like, other, because Tellius is such a big world, there's many different factions in it. So I think about, like, okay, well, what if Alencia was the main lord of the game? What if, etc. was the main lord? What if Tabaran was the main lord? And I think that Ike was really the only way they could have done it. And for that, the story is so crafted in his, in his perspective, especially Path of Radiance, that it's a rich story because I think he is, like, the embodiment of, like, a really good, like, boy to man, coming of age, sort of, like, I know I'm not great yet, but, I'm going to try my best and we're going to win this. And I think another part of that, which is why Ike's so charming, is that he's just a very awkward person. And I really appreciate that because he's not verbose at all. He has trouble kind of, he's too blunt, but also like sometimes doesn't speak up because he knows he's blunt and he shouldn't be in that situation. So Ike is, I don't know, I think he's embodies physical strength as well as like emotional strength. I don't know, Ike is, you know, people are like, is Ike overrated? Ike is not overrated. I just feel like he is like exactly the kind of character he should be, and exactly the kind of character that like Fire Emblem as a series needs. I'd be kind of annoyed if we started getting like a lot of Ikes, and they definitely tried that with Byleth to varying degrees of success. Probably, I mean, I really like Byleth, but it's like despite a lot of, you know, the way the Byleth is written and not because of. That's a different rant, but like, I don't know, Ike is very, very, I don't know, it's like he's the best ideal set of circumstances for what like his character could be and what his character represents in this story versus out of this story. Physical strength, emotional strength, you know, I love that part at the end of Radiant Dawn when he's like, you know, we are all family even when we don't get along. I think the Japanese text says something like, I love people and I love my family, and I believe so strongly in like, you know, and he's telling Asher this, that, you know, love is the heart of like humanity and like what we are made of and not conflict. So I don't know, I love Ike. There's kind of no amount of real praise that I could stop giving Ike, because I think he's just such a fantastic character. So after Ike, let's put Titania. I really like Titania. I think that, you know, one, she's a fantastic Jagen archetype, or Jagen. I'm actually not sure which one is correct. I like that she doesn't fall off, because I remember when I played Engage, I think it was like a late story chapter, and Vander was there, and I was like, what the fuck are you doing there? Like, I don't think you've shown up in the story for like 10 chapters? Not even, like, before Brodia. Maybe before Firene. And, you know, like, obviously everyone benches him like a few chapters in, and I was like, what the hell are you doing here, Vander? And it's not even that I disliked Vander, I'm just like, what is he doing here? Titania is a Jagen archetype, but like, because Ike's sort of advisors are both Soren and Titania, I feel like there's like a really good, like, you know, they're kind of like the devil on both shoulder. Titania is like kind of the optimist, you know, she's not like optimistic to the point of like being foolish, but she's like, no, I think it can work out. I think we can do it. Versus like Soren, who was always like kind of giving like the truth bombs that people don't want to hear. So I feel like because Ike's not necessarily someone who's like, you know, he's not a big strategist, he's not formally trained. I like that, you know, we have Titania as like the ex-military person who's like, okay, yeah, and she gives like not only like, again, emotional and physical strength, she's kind of the brains of the mercenary, but also she is kind of like the heart, because she's like the mother of all of them, and kind of filled in the motherly role after Elena died for Ike and Mist, and honestly the rest of them. So I really like Titania. I'm gonna put her in memorable. I'm gonna put her in love. I love Titania. I think she's a fantastic character, and I'm gonna sort these within the tiers. I'm gonna put her there, and I'll sort the rest of these later. So Titania's there. I'm gonna put Mist next. Where is Mist? Mist is one of my favorite characters in this game. I think she's very sweet. She's obviously part of the, you know, everything I really like about like the Grail Mercenaries plotline includes her. So there's, you know, there's that. I think that she's a very interesting. Obviously, I really like sort of, I tend to really like little sibling characters in these games, so it's not really like, oh, she's so much better than them. You know, Elise is probably my second favorite Fates character, but like, I think making her very distinct in personality from a lot of them kind of ends up making her stand out a bit. I mean, I think she's a little less sassy after Grail dies because that is her dad, and she just went through like a big traumatic part. So she's like a little more clingy to Ike after that, understandably, because he's the only family she has left. You know, outside of like the mercenary family. But yeah, I really like Mist. I think she's adorable. I think she's very sweet. I think that Micaiah ends up kind of stealing a lot of her thunder in Radiant Dawn. So I think that Mist doesn't really... She's not really given like any sort of plot presence in Radiant Dawn. Micaiah even, you know, they even have the same hairstyle. Jill and Mist is probably one of my favorite subplots in Path of Radiance, and it continues on into Radiant Dawn, so that also helps Mist a lot, is that I'm really attached to like her relationship with Jill and how much, you know, Jill's, you know, relationship with her, like, very, not only is critical during like the part when Jill can defect back to the Dayan army if she has not reached an A support with Mist or Leith, but also like, you know, it's very emblematic of like a lot of the greater themes of, you know, like people aren't inherently bad. Like Jill wasn't a terrible person. She just grew up in like a horribly racist environment, honestly thought a lot of her viewpoints were the gospel truth. So when she's realizing, you know, the truth that she was raised with, 100% like inaccurate. It's propaganda. It's widening her world, and like through like Mist's like patience and everything. I don't know. It's like, I really like Mist and Jill's relationship. I don't know. It's really hard to articulate it without like kind of like agonizing over like what I would be even right about. But yeah, Jill and Mist, fantastic relationship. While I'm here, let me put Jill in favorite. For the same reason, I think that, you know, another thing in Mist's favor is that in Radiant Dawn, actually in the art book, they say that the scene where Jill, like, and it defects back to out of the Dayan army again is the canon one. So the same with Zehark. So I think that that's such a nice callback to Path of Radiance, and like, you know, Mist saying flatly like, Jill, we are not fighting. We are not fighting. I won't fight you. You know, you can come over with us. I am not going to fight you. So, and Jill was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm not going to fight you either. You know, I'll join you. I can't do, you know, I can't be a part of this army even though this is my homeland. So, you know, I think that Jill and Mist have one of the strongest relationships ever. I really, really, you know, top tier Fire Emblem Yuri. I just really like Jill and Mist. For the same reason why I'm putting Boyd kind of far down. So let's go back to my Boyd ranking. Boyd is such a bro. I do like him. So this isn't any points off of Boyd. Unfortunately, I really don't like him and Mist as like an official couple at all. I don't have a real reason to dislike it, and I think if you asked me like a couple years ago, I would have said, oh, I hate that shit. I don't dislike it. I am not convinced by it, like, at all. Like, I just never see it, and it's honestly because I just see Mist and Jill so much more than I see Boyd and Mist, and I'm not really a fan of the, like, sort of, like, boy who tugs on a girl's pigtail because he has a crush on her and doesn't know how else to get her attention. I really don't like, you know, like, especially when they're both teenagers, like, heterosexual romances where they're, like, kind of bullying each other. I don't know. It doesn't make me like Boyd. I don't like how he calls her fat. I don't know. He's just always, I know it's because he's doing pot shots at her because he's, like, has a crush and has no other way to, like, really like articulate that, and it, to his credit, by Radiant Dawn, that completely goes away because he's an older guy who's matured more and knows how to, you know, emotionally regulate. So Boyd would be higher. Unfortunately, I've never really used him as a unit successfully, you know, and I just, you know, one of he has two kind of major factors to his character. One of them is his relationship with his brothers, which I think Rolf kind of ends up being the one that I end up liking the most out of that relationship, even though I love all three of their brothers' relationship. And then you get, you know, the other part of Boyd's character is his relationship with Mist. And I you know, I do like that scene in Radiant Dawn that you get if you have an A support, and he's like, I won't let anything happen to her. That's sweet. Um, I'm not a fan. I also don't like that they have a paired ending, but I have a problem with most of the paired endings in Radiant Dawn, as you see. So I would like Boyd. He would be a little higher. It's my personal enjoyment out of him isn't as high as it should be because of that. So that's why Boyd's so low, but it's not that I dislike him at all. It's just that it kind of doesn't add to my like of him. That's that. As far as the Grail mercenaries go, I think we have one more member. Yeah. Soren's gonna be a favorite. Soren is... you know what? There we go. Soren's probably my second favorite, or third favorite Tellius character. I think I like Zelgius a little bit more than him, so... Soren was... I don't know how else to describe it. It's kind of like with Ike. It's like, what can you say about Soren? He's so different for, like, you know, what I'm going to just say it. Soren is kind of the love interest character, and not kind of, he literally is, for Ike in Path of Radiance. And, you know, replaying it, it always is so obvious that Ike is, like, kind of, like, giving Soren a lot more attention because he just really values him. And what I was saying with, like, Ike being, like, the person that, like, you know, he's so different, but he's exactly what, you know, his story needed. Soren is kind of, like, exactly what Ike needed. Ike really likes somebody who kind of cuts through the fog. And I think that Soren's, you know, bluntness, his truth bombs, is kind of exactly what Ike needs in a world that he doesn't fully understand. You know, obviously, Soren does have, like, you know, he's a flawed character, and he goes through a lot of character development. But, like, I like that Soren and Ike, especially from the beginning of the game, till the end of the game, Path and Radiance, and then even further into Radiant Dawn, you can see that they're both trying to improve as people and open up their worldview and emotionally, like... So, you know, that's all Soren's, you know, main role in the plot. Again, I really like that he's kind of like the devil on Ike's shoulder saying, well, we could give Valencia over to Dayan, you know, we're mercenaries. And, you know, there's that aspect. The other aspect is, holy crap, if you go through, and especially the game wants you to, because they lock the true ending of the game behind getting Ike and Soren's ending, you know, the true ending with LeVron and Ashenera. Soren's such an interesting character, because they hide so much, because you're like, yeah, this is kind of like the love interest character, you know, this is the strategist character, you know, and then you go, and it's like, there's a whole character there, and behind that is like an extremely different, deep character, you know, everything with his past, with his father being literally King Ashnard, and his mother being, like, the daughter of King Degensi of Goldoa, and he never figures that out, and I love that he never figures that out. And, you know, Soren has, like, this whole intense backstory that you really don't know much about until you do, like... It's like there's a character behind a character. Soren is such a deep character, you know, and the other thing is, why do I have such a high opinion of Soren when I have such a low opinion of Shinon? Well, Jill's also up here. The thing about Soren is that, you know, this is another thing, the character begs you to kind of examine him closer. So, one thing about Soren that's actually really noticeable, and it's not to excuse this behavior, it's just like, you know, Soren's character begs kind of like a deeper look. Like, you want to know Soren. So, you know, like, one thing that's, you know, people are like, oh wow, why do people like Soren? He's so racist at the beginning of Path of Radiance. But if you notice, when he goes to Benyon, and even Ike's like, why is Soren being so quiet? We got here a few days ago and he's so quiet. It's because he went to the Melior library and he found out he was branded. So he went his entire life not knowing he was branded, and he thought that, you know, every Laguz he had ever met hated him for no reason. And after that, Soren's a lot more different. Obviously, that doesn't erase the trauma, but, like, you know, he's an intelligent person. He's like, oh, there were reasons there were reasons for that. And obviously being treated like you're an invalid, like you don't even exist, as like a 4-year-old child has to be so intensely traumatic. And Titania's like, well, Soren's a very empathetic person. And I actually have no idea if that's a mistranslation. I really agree with that, though. Soren is very deeply affected by everything that happened to him, but he knows, there's the whole like heart versus mind. It's like I could keep going on about how interesting Soren is, but like, I don't know, Soren's the GOAT. He's the best character. It's like I could keep going on about Soren, and that's why he's the best character. So that's where Soren goes. Speaking of, should I continue with the Path of Radiance people? Let's put Alencia up. I think I'm gonna put her in faves. If she's probably at the bottom of faves, at the top of like really, really love. So yeah, Alencia is like interesting because I think compared to all of the other main characters, she's kind of the most typical of like a Fire Emblem Lord. So she's like, she's kind of similar to Leaf. She's like, or Marth even, that she's like, oh, my homeland was invaded and I need to rise up. It's interesting that like Path of Radiance doesn't let her fight for so long, because they're like, well, well, one, she just legitimately did not have the equipment to be able to fight, because that was back in Crimea. Two, it's like, oh yeah, but like if you die in battle, Alencia, it is literally all over. And she has to like, do so much, like trying to curry favor with Benyon, and even after that, like the whole situation in Crimea, why her birth was secret in the first place, and the whole problem with the Crimean lords, and and because of, she's like, oh my gosh, I was never raised to do any of this. And you feel so bad for her because like, she's like, I didn't ask for any of this. I was not raised to do this. I was raised to be kind of like just like a typical like noble woman helping around the house, doing laundry. She was raised with her retainers. She, was raised with like some sort of battle training. But like, you can imagine when her uncle took the throne, she'd probably be like, maybe formally introduced as like, oh yeah, It's so sad because she's like, I was never meant to do any of this. And she's like, well, instead of being very sad about it, which she's allowed to be in my opinion, she's like, but I have to do this for my country. And she's just she's a really interesting character. She's like, I've been, it's kind of like the whole like greatness thrust upon you. She has to do what she needs to do in that moment. And like the whole part when like Lucia is like, okay, well, what if we kill like the person closest to you? And she's like, I literally have to keep going. Like I can't. This is more than me. Alencia's great. She's a fantastic character. When I first got into Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, Alencia and Soren were my favorite characters, and I'm a little less high on Alencia as time goes on. And it's literally not that I dislike her or anything. It's just that like I feel like she's kind of the most straightforward character to kind of understand. So like as time goes on, I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly what to expect from Alencia. And speaking of Alencia, I'll do her retainers next. So Lucia, I really like Lucia, kind of for the same reasons that I really like Alencia. I really like part 2 of Radiant Dawn, and that's where she really shines. With the whole like Crimean almost civil war that's going on. Lucia, I really like all the chapters with her. I really like her in Path of Radiance. I hate her romance with Bastion. I just will never see Bastion and her as anything other than at least 10 or 20 years age difference. The fact that the art book was like, Bastion's like 24 and Lucia's like 21. I'm like, no. That doesn't make any sense at all. Why would Bastion be so young? Why would anyone take him seriously if he was that young? I don't know. I'm sorry. That's my haterism. Yeah, Lucia, she's awesome. She's a great unit. I really like her as a swordmaster. She's voiced by Amelie, and she's pretty. Jeffrey's gonna be a little lower. I'll put him in like, honestly, I don't know. I think for me, the game just wants Jeffrey to be a bit more important than he kind of ends up being. He's just kind of the typical knight character. And there's nothing really more interesting. I don't know. I like, he's got that whole like, oh, I'm secretly loving with Valencia. Good for him. They keep saying he's like so strong, and he's fine. It's like, I feel like I've been told that he's cooler than he is. And, when you hype up a character, you have to expect him to be that good. That's kind of like why I don't like Clive, even though, he's not that bad. I hate Clive because they spent all the time, the entire game, being like, Clive's the best, Clive's the greatest, he's the best warrior in the realm. And you get him and he's mid. And you're like, okay. What about it? Also, Jeffrey's the only character that in the second half of the game, because Path of Radiance is really hard for the first half, and it's super fucking easy for the second half, Jeffrey is the only character. Did I say Clive? I meant Jeffrey. Jeffrey's the only character that died. And I was like, I'm not resetting for him. So, and Jeffrey's gets like a random chapter in part 3, and it's fine. So maybe if Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn got like a remaster, remake, and he had voice acting, and I could empathize with him more a little. I do like his voice actor in Heroes. I don't know, I keep saying like he kind of sucks. Maybe he's good and I don't remember. I kind of liked his green armor more now that I put all 3 of these together. I don't know, Jeffrey's fine. I like him. I don't love him. That's Jeffrey. Let's put Astrid. I'm gonna put Astrid in really like, and you know what? I'm gonna put Astrid in really like. I've been using Radiant Dawn portraits. Path of Radiance Astrid. I really like Path of Radiance Astrid. Radiant Dawn Astrid is a different character, in my opinion. I did use her. I brought her to endgame in Radiant Dawn the last time I played. She's not a bad character. She's by no means broken, and I think Paragon kind of makes you think that she's better than she is, because, she hits level 20 before anyone else, and you're like, oh my god, awesome. And then you're like, oh, she's not getting any more stats. Like, she's reached her peak already. And that actually might be why Jeffrey kind of seems better than he is, because he also has Paragon. No, Astrid is really good in Path of Radiance, though. And I do like bow cavalry unit. So I really like her endgame conversations. She has 3 of them with Lacane, why did I say that with an accent? Lacane, Levile, and Severin. Laron. 3 Ellie's. That was the main reason I wanted to bring her to endgame, is I was like, well, I got like 2 slots or something that I could bring anybody because I got my main force. Let's just bring Astrid. Really great conversations. I really like, the whole aspect of her character that's like, I was a Benyon noblewoman and I was engaged to this guy. Crazy. He's like 70 years old. And she's like 16 or something? That's crazy. I can't believe that. And she's like, well, in order to like literally escape this insane marriage, I'm going to join the army and, I'm going to try to do my best. And I know I have older siblings who literally, they're like in terrible like marriages and their letters come back sobbing about it. And, that's her whole thing with Soth, because that's the whole like, well, Soth is literally homeless, and Astrid is from a noble family, so you have, like, 2 wildly different experiences, and they realize, oh, class is a whole thing. It doesn't make you miserable automatically. It does absolutely add challenges to your life, but, like, being rich does not solve all your problems, and, all of that. Astrid's a great character, and then you get to Radiant Dawn Endgame, and that's all reflected with, like, showing Lacane and showing Levile who she used to know, and then having Severin be like, did you meet your parents who were turned to stone? Does that, how does that affect your decision? She was like, I still want to fight, and he was like, well, you're really strong, and you have grown so much, so, there's that, and I want to know more about that. But then you get to most of Radiant Dawn, Astrid, and they literally got Nanjo Yoshino as their voice actor? And then you're like, oh wow, Astrid must be an amazing character. And then you look at, like, the rest of Radiant Dawn, they decided to, like, decide she was just obsessed with Makalov, and that was really annoying. For a lot of people, I would not be surprised if they put Astrid down in, like, awful. I hold strong to Path of Radiance Astrid, and I hold strong that maybe one day we'll get a remake, and they'll make Radiant Dawn Astrid just as good as Path of Radiance Astrid. Because it was almost there. It's literally just all they had to do was make her less obsessed with Makalov. Anyway, Makalov. Awful. We're putting him in awful. It's a Makalov. It's Makalov. He sucks. He sucks so bad. And the thing about Makalov, he doesn't care about anyone. It's like, Makalov, literally, at every moment, you're like, literally, this is all your fault. This every moment of your life, this is your fault. You treat everyone in your family like dirt. You treat the people who love you like dirt. You treat Astrid like dirt. And you're like, I want to feel bad about this guy because gambling is literally an addiction, which is literally like a mental health thing. He's given like every opportunity and he's like completely unapologetic. You're not even like, well, maybe he's trying to get out of it. Maybe he feels bad. No, he doesn't. Makalov just sucks. He sucks as a unit, and you should just, on the Old Town Road in Path of Radiance, just kill him. Nothing is obtained. Makalov sucks. He's awful. I would not feel comfortable putting Xion next to literally these slave owners and pedophiles. I will put Makalov there. He's literally that bad. Nothing redeemable about that guy. Anyway. We'll put Callow. Callow's cool. I like her. I don't know, maybe I'll put her in great. Maybe I'll probably keep her in like. I like Callow. I like that she's an older woman in a Fire Emblem game who's married to a man. I like that she's flirty and funny. I like her support with Tormod. She's great. I like her. I like her relationship with Amy. I like that if you put her in the same army as Ranulf, you get to reunite Amy with her mom. That's sweet. I like that she's sassy. I like that she's confident. I like her design. Callow's great. I like Callow. So this guy's the same character. Like, are we all real about this? Devdan and Danved are the same character. They're the same character. There's just like, I don't find that, I don't get the joke. It's not that I, like, when I say I don't think it's funny, it's like, a lot of people say that, like, I don't think that's funny. And it means that they think that, like, it's extremely unfunny and they're, like, really mad about it. No, I don't think it's funny. I literally don't get what the joke is supposed to be. So, there's Devdan and Danved. There's problems with this character. I understand that the way that race is written in Path of Radiance, Radiant Dawn, is distinctly, like, Asian, like, between different Asian countries and stuff. So, like, like, for example, branded people are basically Hafu. You could kind of view, like, the way that other Lagos nations are written is kind of similar to how, like, Japanese people view, like, other Asian countries, especially the ones they've invaded. It's just, like, the Benyon and how they view the rest of Asia and stuff. But because of Danved's design, it just feels so contradictory to the rest of the game to have a character that's literally kind of like a minstrel archetype. And like, if you look at just the way the character's written, if you only read his lines, especially his Japanese lines where he actually, I think he speaks in a very like kind of polite, feminine way, you would think, oh, this is fine a character, what's wrong? It's literally the design. The design is the entire problem. But it's literally like, if a game is about race, you can't be doing that. So, it's just Devdan. It feels so contradictory to the rest of the game. It's a disappointment. I don't even know if they'd fix it. They should fix it though. I don't care if, people get mad. It's literally just the design. So that's Danved. Well, since I mentioned Nefni, we'll do Nefni. I really like Nefni. Her character's a lot simpler, kind of in the vein of like Mia and Ilyana. She's kind of a simple character, but she's really sweet. Like, she's just, I really like her support with Callow. You know what? I'll put Callow up. I feel bad. I really like her support with Callow when Callow's like, I was from the countryside too. I just trained myself. You honestly don't need to do anything though, Nefni. You're fine as you are. So I like that, people think that she's shy, but like, she's literally like so embarrassed about being from the countryside that she like tries not to speak. But she's actually like a really outgoing, sweet person. I really like, this is outside of Tellius, but I really like her harmonic conversation with Sakura. That one was really sweet. Yeah, Nefni, I like her design. I like her halberd. It's interesting though, one of my friends who hasn't played this game recently got, I think it was after Nefni and Sakura's harmonic was added, they were like, oh, is Nefni supposed to be like a shy person from the countryside? And I was like, yeah, that's her whole thing. And they were like, oh, I thought she was like a noblewoman, and I was like, oh yeah, it's just Hutchins' art is like super, you know, everything they touch is very beautiful. So because she has like fierce look and really pretty clothes, it makes her look kind of like Claire. And I think she was the first Cypher card I ever got. Yeah, Nephene's cool. If I hear people say Nephene is my favorite, and I'm like, yeah, she's cool. I like her. I guess if we did Nephene, we'll do Braum. I like Braum. He's sweet. I don't remember a ton of his support with Boyd is actually really bad. Like, Boyd, like, makes fun of him and, like, weight shames him. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I should put Boyd lower. He's constantly calling Mist fat, and he's calling, like, Braum fat. Braum's a nice guy. What is he talking about? I don't know. I like Braum. I don't really have a lot to say about him, other than he's a sweet guy. Completely unusable as a unit, but he's fairly sweet. Well, if I did Braum, I'll put Meg in like. I think Meg is like a really cool character as a potential. I just think that, obviously she's just, I mean, awful just doesn't even, you can begin to describe it as a unit. Completely unusable is more like, you know, I really admire the people who can, like, you know, take Meg to endgame. Even like her first map is just so unsuited for her. It's really sad how much it's like her and Fiona. It's like if they ever remake this game, they have to completely, you know, because on one hand I like that the Dawn Brigade isn't very good. On the other hand, well, okay, I don't think it makes sense that Fiona sucks as a unit because she's literally the daughter of one of the Four Riders. Like, you know, I know that they said that Grail was, like, above and beyond his peers. I mean, even if Fiona's dad... Yeah, I'm gonna put Fiona. She's on, like... You know what? I don't know. She doesn't have enough of a character to say great. But I think, you know, I like her as much as I like Claire. We're gonna put her in great. If her dad was just as good as, like, even Tornado, not even Grail, you'd think that she was probably just, like, usable as a unit. So I'm like, Meg, I understand maybe on some sort of like gameplay integration. The same way like Edward and Leonardo aren't very good as units because they are literally not trained soldiers. So I'm like, okay, why is her strength stat so bad? It's literally lower than Tellius's when he joins. And Tellius, it's so stressed out he throws up if he gets stressed out. He gets so excited he just starts sweating. Why is her strength stat lower than Tellius? Braum said she can lift off a cow? You know how heavy cows out? I don't know. Anyway, my opinion on Meg as a character is that she's an awesome character design. Like, I think she's one of the, like, standout character designs in the entire series. I love Meg's design. As far as her as a character, it kind of just hinges on, you know, like, oh, my dad promised that this guy that he met in the last war would marry me. And that's the whole thing with Zehark, and Zehark's like, obviously, one, Zehark's a grown adult, Meg's like a teenage girl. Two, Zehark is probably, I don't know, he comes across as the person who probably will never ever get married again. So, like, there's that. So, you know, you're like, okay, well, Meg is doomed from the start if she's, like, really into Zehark, because it's just not gonna happen. I don't know, I don't hate that as a concept. I just kind of wish Meg got something else. I don't know. Her concept is amazing. It's just the execution. It's not bad. It just does not live up to what I want it to be. I don't know. I really like Meg. You know what? Fiona and Meg's design, put them in great. Fiona's design is awesome. It's just the same thing as Meg. Is I wish that she got more. It's because she's such a cool design. I love her battle lines, the few that she has. Her chapter she gets introduced in is like really cool. It's hard as fuck, but it's cool. And then she's kind of just not there for like the rest of the entire game, and that's just really unfortunate. I like her design a lot. I don't know. Meg and Fiona deserve a lot better, but I really like their designs and like their potential. But I can't justify putting them up higher. Let's do Tormod. Tormod and Moram. We're gonna put Tormod in great. I feel like Tormod's a character that, like, I know a lot more people love. He's, like, their favorite. So, on some level, I'm kind of inclined to be like, oh, well, I should like him just that much. And I don't. So I'm like, okay, well, it makes me feel like I like him a lot less. And then I play the game, and I'm like, yeah, Tormod's really great. So, there's that. I think he is one, you know, he is in that echelon of, like, just super young characters to be in these games. But I really like his you know, his personal story, with him in the Laguza Emancipation Army. You know, I like him in Muaram. I'm gonna also put Muaram, I'm going to put in really like. I really like Muaram. I think he's one of the most effective characters in the game for, you know, what he represents. Tormod is kind of carried a lot by his relationship with Muaram, and he's, you know, he's really funny. He's got that rapport with Soth, and, like, I don't think he's very usable. Well, he's mid in Path of Radiance. In Radiant Dawn, he's just kind of screwed over by having such low map availability. I think I brought Muaram to endgame in Path of Radiance last time I played it. It's like, he really carried. He's really good. Muaram not only has that really sweet relationship with Tormod being like his dad, he also has that fantastic support with Zhark. That's one of what I would put in, like, the top 5 supports in Path of Radiance, is the one with Zhark. And yeah, Muaram's a great character. He got a really good voice actor in Heroes. I feel like I say that a lot, but I don't know. When you have a character who survives such a, you know, atrocious sort of race crime and has to kind of, like, you know, continue living and, like, being in the world and being next to people who are the same race as, like, your oppressor and stuff, considering that person a family, I don't know. Muaram, for the character he is and what he represents, he's a character that just really sticks with me. And I always think about, like, you know, some of his supports, and he's kind, he's quiet. I would really, really love to see more of Muaram. He's really, really great. Vika's a character that, again, I'm gonna say this about a lot of the Radiant Dawn exclusive characters. They don't have supports, so I don't think that not having supports immediately disqualifies you from being, like, a good character. But at the same time, like, there isn't, like, you know, I would put Reese, like, at least 1 tier lower if it wasn't for some of his supports. I would put Muaram another tier lower because of some of his supports. It's just, it bumps you up a tier if you have really good supports. So Vika, I feel like I shouldn't put this high because I'm like, you know, there isn't as much there because, you know, she doesn't have the opportunity to be. That being said, her design rocks, and I do like her base conversation with Micaiah a lot, and she's just really pretty. So I would like to see more of Vika, especially her being, like, a former slave and everything, and her being weary. That part when she's like, well, there is something about me that makes me want to fear you, Micaiah, but I know that that's not correct. I know that that's not a rational, like, instinct for me to have, so I don't want to dislike you for no reason. That, I don't know, in the context of, like, this entire game and, like, the story and, like, how the Branded are treated, that is so radical to me that Vika's like, I mean, I have this, like, gut instinct, but I just know it's incorrect because you're a kind person. You're standing right in front of me. That's fantastic. So Vika, honestly, through that alone, gets bumped up a tier. Even if she doesn't have a support, that's good enough as a support for me. So, to me, she's very memorable. So, I really like Vika. I like her. Again, I really like her voice in Heroes. I love Amberly Connors for her. I would love to hear her do it more. Again, the Tellius voice cast in Heroes is so good. It makes me want a remake that much more. Honestly, if they did nothing just to, you know, add voices to the entire game, that would be... I can think of so many scenes that would be fantastic with the voice acting that they have in Heroes. So, you know, Muaram, Vika, just all of these characters, I'm like, oh, please give them a full game. You know, they do these characters so well. So, I did the Laguza Emancipation Army. So why don't I do Mordecai? Mordecai I'm gonna put in really like. I think Mordecai's not really a character that sticks with me. It's not like I tend to think about him the same way I do, you know, some of these other characters. When I think about Mordecai, I'm like, he's great. He's a great character. I think for like the Gentle Giant character, he's a standout. He's a great unit. He really carries me through Path of Radiance, especially with how difficult the early game of that is. He, again, talking about supports that really carry a character. Oh my god, Mordecai and Stefan's support is just insane. Oh, that one hits me so hard. Oh, I get emotional just thinking about that one. Mordecai being like, you know, for the same reason I really like Vika, Mordecai being like, you know, in a very simple way of him just saying poignantly, I don't want to deny what is right in front of me, you know, you're my friend, I don't want to pretend like you're invisible. Oh, that, I don't know, Mordecai, he's sweet. There's that one base conversation in Radiant Dawn when the people in Crimea are like, Mordecai was so nice to us, like, why do we hate the Lagoose so much, you know? You know, you can say all you want about, like, oh, people are racist until they meet one nice guy of a different race, but, like, for some people who have never met, you know, somebody else of that race, if they have such a positive impression, it can undo a lot of prejudice. So, you know, that is a real thing that happens. So, you know, Mordecai just being such a kind person. There's those early scenes of Leith and, like, Ike and Soren, and it's so combative, and then Mordecai's like, I'm sorry, I don't want to hurt anyone, I don't want anyone to fight, and you're like, Mordecai, you're such a nice guy. So yeah, I really like Mordecai, he's great, so I'm gonna put him in really like. So speaking of Leith, we'll do her. I really like Leith. You know what, Leith's a great character. I think over time, I feel like, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, she's like the tsundere cat girl. And to me, I'm like, oh my god, but Leith is so much more than that. You know, she's definitely tsundere, but how do I explain it? It's like, when you look at, like, her support with, like, Jill and how impactful that is, you're like, okay, but, like, it's so, you know, it's so reductive just to call her, like, the tsundere cat girl. Like, to me, it's like, Leith is, like, you know, also, I'm forever indebted to her, because her support with Jill is, like, if you read that, you don't even need to watch my timeline video. It's like, read that and then read Nazir telling Kurth Naga about, like, LeRon. And then that's it. That's my entire timeline video. You can save an hour. Leith is very, I don't know, she seems like somebody that you're like, I want to be around. Like, she reminds me of, like, people that I knew in college that I was like, they're so well informed, they're so resolute in their opinions. You know, they're very fully formed people so early in life. And I don't think Leith is, like, a kid, but, like, I don't know, she seems like a fully grown adult to me, but, like, when you look at people who are so resolute in their opinions, they really encourage you to be better people by proxy. So that's Leith to me. She has a lot of conviction, and sometimes it's a little too much conviction, like she's a little too stubborn, but I find that conviction of hers very heartwarming. It's like, it's very inspiring. You know, you get stuff like, you know, her support with Jill. Again, really good support. Where she's like, you know, Jill's like, I don't know. I literally just don't know, because she is, like, genuinely ignorant. And Leith is like, then learn. Literally just learn. And you're like, you know what? You're right. If you don't know something, just learn. So, I don't know. Leith is a character I admire a lot. I think that she's great. As a unit, she's busted. She's like, wow. She's like literally like a sword master, but like with cavalry range. She's like crazy. I think she has Canto. I can't remember if that's true. Leith's great. I really like Leith. She's great. Ranulf, memorable, really love. Ranulf is a great character. Again, I always forget that he's like the head of Gallia's army, especially by Radiant Dawn. He's like the gift cut to Scamir's Kennegus. So I keep forgetting how much of a big deal he is, because he's just so laid back. He's very chill. He's very personable. You know, another trait I really admire of his, he always kind of knows what to say. He's like, hey, Ike, like, he's very good at reading Ike, which is like, again, because Ike's such an awkward person, you know, that's why I think that they make a really nice couple, is Ranulph and Ike. I mean, Ike and Soren is my preference between the two of them, but that does not mean Ike and Ranulph is, like, bad by any means. Like, if Ike Soren is S tier, Ike and Ranulph is A tier. A plus, baby. It's like, you know, I always remember that, you know, Ranulph made Ike, like, laugh out loud in their sports. Ranulph is just a very personable person. He understands people. You know, if you look at those early Gallia chapters, you know, Ranulph is able to be like, okay, Ike is a good intended person. He's just ignorant. Let me just tell him, hey, Ike, not all Laguz are good people. You know, obviously, we're in a very Laguz dominant society right here. People are free to, you know, not everyone is like, you know, many of these people don't know, you know, then that's kind of like, you know, like some of the experiences of like being what people would say is like, you know, an oppressed person in an oppressed homeland versus an oppressed person, but like in a community of people that they've never actually faced, like being oppressed. So Ranulph is actually like able to be like, oh, yeah. So people in Gallia are actually a lot more confident about how they feel because they've never, like, you know, they've never been enslaved. They've never, like, lived in Benyon or Crimea. And so, you know, Ranulph being like, I'm not going to fight these people in the port because it's going to look bad on Gallia as a whole. I don't know. Ranulph is, like, extremely intelligent, both emotionally and, like, you know, intellectually. I don't know how to say that. I don't know. Ranulph is just a very memorable person. And that's nothing to say, like, Radiant Dawn and how much I've really enjoyed part 2 of Radiant Dawn. And a lot of that is carried by Ranulph and Skymir's relationship. And Ranulph, you know, like the Grail Mercenaries and stuff and all of that kind of thing. Ranulph is, you know, I really like how confident he is in Path of Radiance. And then in Radiant Dawn, he has to take care of Skymir, so it's like kind of like you get to see another side of him. There's a lot of people who are like, this is my favorite character in the game. I'm like, hell yeah. Ranulph's great. He's very great. So, yep, he's memorable. Skymir. Really like Skymir. It's so funny because the other two lion characters, you only get to see so many, like, characters of each sort of, Laguz type in the game. So, like, you only get to see so many cats, and, like, Leith and, Ranulph are so different as cats, so there's that. You immediately see, oh, okay, so, you know, this game does actually do, like, quite a bit, like, oh, ravens are just like this. Cats are just like this. But, like, through some of the examples, you can see, like, obviously, Vika's very different from Nesala. But since you go through a whole game with only seeing, like, Kennegus and Gifka as the lions, you're like, oh, lions must be, like, you know, what people think of as lions, like, very dignified, you know, calm, kings of the jungle, or savannah, or whatever. Skymir, I love that he's just a fucking himbo. He's really funny. You can see that he, like what I was saying about people from Gallia, have just never, like, obviously they grow up knowing how Laguz are treated, and, like, the history, and all of, like, you know, Gallia breaking off from Benyon because they didn't want to be enslaved and all of that. So you're like, okay, there's a lot of confidence there. But, like, his arc of, like, his relationship with Ranulph, his, like, kind of coming into leadership, being like, okay, we might have, like, really fucked up our invasion of Benyon, but you really grew as a leader, so Gallia's in great hands. I love that. He's in a lot of cutscenes. He was kind of like the face of Radiant Dawn because they didn't really want to show that Ike was in the game. Oh, yeah. Skymir has an amazing design. Like, he is hot. Skymir is hot. I love his, you know, design. I think he's handsome. He's, like, kind of both cute and hot. Skymir's great. Skymir's great. He should be in Heroes so bad. Do it for me. Do it for me, Intelligent Systems. And a lot of people I know really like Skymir. Also, it's really funny that he's, like, in love with Soren. That's so funny. And Soren's like, I'm not interested. That's super funny. Let's do Nyla. We'll do Nyla next. I'm gonna put memorable really love. Obviously she gets a lot less attention because she doesn't get sports. That being said, Nyla is awesome. Every second that she has on screen is really memorable to me. Like it's like every single one of her scenes I remembered super well. You know, I like on one level, Micaiah's like, I like that she has like kind of someone looking over her. I don't want to say that like Nyla kind of acts like like a mom or even like an older sister, but like, you know, it's nice that she has like kind of an older role model to look up to. I like, my favorite fucking line in any of these games is her telling Sephiroth, "You have too many opinions, I'm done talking." So funny. I love her design. I think her relationship with Raphael is like so sweet. That scene with her and Tabarn is funny as hell. She's hot. She's a confident lady queen. And I like her. I really like Nyla. Do I have, you know, this memorable really love part is really split between like characters with like a ton of really good writing and like characters that I think are very hot and cool ladies. So this is my preference list. So Nyla, let's put Raphael. We're gonna put Raphael next to her. Spoiler alert, all the Herons are gonna be in this tier. I really like all of the Herons in this game, especially the triad of like all three of them, kind of, you know, representing different things. Raphael's story is so sad. I don't know, it's like, when you think about the Serenus Massacre, and I do a lot, because, yeah, that I'm me, I just get so sad thinking about, like, you know, at least Leanne got to, like, sleep through it. Raphael and Rayson literally went, like, the last 20 years thinking, like, they were the sole survivor of their race, and it's just so sad to think about. You know, Hetzel, I think, is a reprehensible person who just does not deserve any pity. He does get one W for letting Raphael go. You know, he does not excuse him buying Raphael in the first place. He still bought a slave, but letting him go because he's like, you know, I didn't do anything. I'm a coward. I literally knew that they were going to do a genocide and I didn't do anything. But like being like, I can, on my guilty conscience, I have to let my slave go. So, Hetzel doesn't get points for that, but it is just memorable. Also, I really like his relationship with Micaiah. I like that both times Micaiah cries on screen. There might be like a third or a fourth, but like off the top of my head, off the cuff, she cries twice, and it's at the end of part 1, and then towards the end of part 3. At the end of 313 when like Nyla and Raphael are approaching them. Micaiah's under so much stress, and then Raphael just comes over, and Micaiah is like she's literally like an army general, but like she is a human and she's under a lot of stress. So Raphael being like, "It's okay, Micaiah," and hugging her, and she just starts crying. That gets me so bad. A lot of people are like, Raphael was kind of unnecessary, and I don't care. He's a delight. I like Raphael. He's so sweet. Rayson, my bad. I didn't mean to put him in memorable. I meant to put him in favorites. Rayson is fantastic. He is one of my favorite characters in this entire game. His story arc in Path of Radiance gets me so bad. I get so emotional thinking about it every single time I get to that scene with him in Asala. I am shaking. If I ever heard that voice acted, I would just start sobbing. Okay, I think this is day 4 recording. The thing with Rayson is the first time I experienced Path of Radiance, I was reading the script on my work breaks, and I was like the only person in the store. Because I was like, I was not named as such, and I was not paid as such, but I was basically the assistant manager of a small store. So on my work breaks, I would be there in the middle of Pokemon Go Summer, crying. Because of I was reading Path of Radiance's script. And Rayson made me so sad. I was so intensely upset. Like, I viscerally remember, like, crying on my work break on the scene when they sells him into slavery, and I was so upset. And, you know, and then it was, like, the last couple like minutes of it, and somebody walked in, and I was like, oh, okay, I have to like pretend to be like this really smiley person working at this like store in front of children. Okay. And I don't know. It's that scene when Tabarn's talking to him and he's like, but if you do this, you're not you anymore. And Raisin is kind of defined by how much rage he feels towards his situation, but also that he is like a Heron, and I like that he embodies both aspects. And that just like carries over into Radiant Dawn. There's one really cute scene that was cut from the English version of Radiant Dawn that's Ike officially making Raisin like a member of the Grail Mercenaries, and Raisin's so happy. It's so cute. I don't know, link to like an explanation on the extended version of Radiant Dawn script. But oh, that's such a sweet scene. And then you get like his relationship with Tabarn, which is one of my favorites in the entire series. I don't know, Raisin's fantastic. He really is like one of a kind. And I'm faves. Raisin is one of my favorites. We're gonna put Nisala in really like. I used to hate Nisala a lot. Like, I was just so upset. I was like, I don't even care what your explanation is. I can't believe you would do that to your childhood friend. And then, like, you know, the more I kind of like read through the plot, I could see how his hands were tied in specific scenes. And, you know, the way, like, even right before that, he was arguing with Raisin, saying, Raisin, you can say all this, but you've never had to be in charge of an entire country. So you don't have to make tough decisions and make, like, you know, shitty deals in order to, like, try to make your country somewhat, even, like, baseline out of, just right out of poverty, not even prosperous. So, you know, and that's not without, like, the basically sort of Damocles kind of hanging over his head, that if he doesn't do, like, the equivalent of, like, political blackmail, where if he doesn't do this, his people will be decimated by the Benyon Empire. Through, like, a magical piece of paper, but, like, you know, that is a real thing that happens in real life. To the effect of a blood pact, there are countries in the pocket of another country, and they cannot do anything. And it's baffling, but, like, it is basically, like, living under duress. So, you know, when I was like, I can't be really mad at, like, Tellius, like, you know, fighting the Laguz Emancipation Army, the Gallian Phoenix Force. I can't really be mad at Tellius and Micaiah for, like, any of their actions, so I'm like, well, I can't be mad at Nisala either. Because, you know, not only has he very recently, how do I say this? It's not something that happened recently and that they're trying to call the shots with it. Nisala is interesting in that he has lived like, it's baked into the foundation of Kilvis. And that was kind of the guesswork I did on my timeline. Kilvis was only a nation for 3 years before it was subjugated by the Benyon Empire. And so, you know, that kind of, what do you do when you inherit that legacy? Like, I think it was like 100 or 200 years of, like, your nation just not existing without being in the pocket of the Benyon Empire. And because of that, the way that your entire race is viewed as, like, shrewd and backstabby. So, you know, on some level, I've had to reckon with all of that when it comes to Nisala, because I think the first time I went through Path of Radiance, I hated that guy. I hated him so bad. I'm like, I just can't believe you would do all of that. And I'm not somebody who's like, I hate it when a character betrays me in a video game. But, like, it just felt like his crimes were way too far. But, like, and I do think that they're very hefty crimes. Like, make no mistake, even though, you know, it was like a day that Raisin was locked in Oliver's attic, that is still, like, an intensely traumatic thing to happen to anyone. And, like, Nisala was the one who, like, lured him there because he had basically no other choice. It doesn't help that Nisala's baseline personality is kind of smarmy. So he, like, kind of pretends that he's like, oh, please forgive me, Raisin. When he was like, yeah, I mean, I was going to try to get you back, like, in 2 more days. Like, I was going to try to rescue you. And he's like, well, yeah, You still did. It's because I have to think through all of this. It's made me like Naysala more, but I don't think he'll ever be like a favorite of mine, just because my feelings are so conflicted. But I do really like Naysala. I've really come to like appreciate him as a character. It's also very funny when Tabarn is like, I'm gonna fucking kill you. Speaking of Tabarn, favorites. Tabarn. I love Tabarn so much. I don't know how else to explain it. It's like, to me, Tabarn is like the epitome of like a really good revolutionary leader. So like actually a character that reminds me of Tabarn a lot and nobody ever says it is he reminds me of Edelgard a lot. Like someone who's just intensely loyal to their people to the point of being a little stubborn. In Tabarn's case, being a little pig-headed. Another character Edelgard reminds me of is Sanaki. And to the point where I'm like, I'm really confused why everyone thinks Edelgard's like Micaiah, when I think she's more like Tabarn and Sanaki put together. Like, kind of arrogant, but like very, very fiercely like, I know exactly what kind of future I want. So, Tabarn is just, to me, like passion incarnate. There's that scene in Radiant Dawn when everyone's like, the air is just filled with order. Like it's stagnant. It's, you almost feel so at peace because of how just like still the world is. And Tabarn's like, well, no, never forget that this is not how the world is. The world is chaotic and it's messy, and that's the world we live in. That's, it's not supposed to be like this. So, I think, when it comes to like, like if we are like kind of the Yoon's forces against a share, we're kind of on the epitome of like chaos. Tabarn to me is like the top characters in Radiant Dawn. Like the lords to me are, obviously Ike and Micaiah, and then the second tier of that is Alencia and Tabarn. Honestly, I think Tabarn almost has a case over Alencia if it wasn't for Part 2. Because, the third part of the army is the Hawk army. It's not Alencia's army. Even though I do definitely think Alencia is, like, considered the third lord of the game. I think Tabarn is pretty much tied with her, though, because I think he is one character that embodies chaos so well. And, in a very, like, organized, but, like, determined way. Like, he is so determined about his future. He's funny, he's hot, he doesn't cut corners. He very, very strongly thinks what he thinks. And it's Tabarn. I love Tabarn so much. He's probably one of the best characters. Also, you can use him in Path of Radiance Endgame, and it's the best ever. It makes, it's just as great as using him in Radiant Dawn. But being able to be like, you can use Tabarn feels, it's, whew. You can also use Naysala, which is very funny because he's very weak. But, and Gifka's great. But you can use Tabarn, whew, that makes me so happy. Anyway, Tabarn's one of my favorites. He's fantastic. I love him. Hi, editing me here. I realized I forgot to talk about Leanne. Yeah, so I put her in Memorable Really Love. I think that Leanne's interesting because I think she's a character that does not really shine the first time around, especially in, like, she's definitely a character you have to, like, look up, if that makes sense. Like, she doesn't have supports because she's not playable in Path of Radiance, and in Path of Radiance, she speaks in the ancient language for most of the time. I think all of her speech is in the ancient language, and then in Radiant Dawn, I think she is kind of, like, held back by not knowing a lot of the modern tongue, but if you look at her dialogue translated, she's hilarious. She has actually such a strong personality. She's really funny. She's very sassy and kind of confident. And she's very unique. I think that you're kind of given like Rayson, who's very different for a Heron. And then you're given Raphael, who's very typical of a Heron. And I think once you get to the point of where you meet Leanne, you're like, okay, well, I don't really know what kind of a Heron she is, other than in her actions. Like, oh, she wants to be part of this battle in like Radiant Dawn. Okay, so she is strong-willed, but we're kind of just told she's strong-willed. We're like seeing her actions. So I think that that's interesting. When you look at Leanne's translated lines, you kind of get a better grasp, and I think that that's interesting when you like factor in, like, you know, with a lot of the paired endings in Tellius, you kind of get the sense that, well, they're not very popular, aren't they? It's kind of only Ike Soren and Ike and Ranulph that's very popular, and then you kind of start getting them like kind of dwindled down. Like Alency and Jeffrey is probably the second most popular. Soth and Micaiah is basically only popular in Japan. And then you get like truly terrible ones like, well, Miss and Boyd are popular too, but not really popular, but like it definitely has its fans. And then you get like terrible ones like Maklov and Astrid. I think with Leanne and Nisala, it's pretty universally liked. I've only met a couple people who straight up disliked it. And so I think that with Nisala and Leanne, you kind of get the sense that, you know, you're supposed to appreciate them both in tandem because they're characters created in tandem. I think that that aspect of Leanne, that you don't quite get her essence on the first try, obviously because you're not really supposed to be able to read the ancient tongue without reading like translations online. I think that that makes kind of their joint story that much stronger, and appreciating them not just as like a romantic couple, but like as a duo of like two characters that are supposed to be appreciated together. In the same way, I feel like Nyla and Raphael are two characters that are kind of meant to be appreciated together. So that's what makes Nisala and Leanne interesting, and that's without going into the intricacies of why like their relationship is interesting. The other thing about Leanne, I think, is just kind of like growing pains as far as like her unique situation, in that she doesn't speak the modern tongue, and when she does, she speaks in broken English. I don't think that necessarily hinders her, but what was I saying? It does make it sort of in the same way like a character like Petra. A lot of people have said that like, oh, you know, the way that there's kind of writing somebody learning a language is kind of cringy. I can understand why that would be that way for Leanne, with her like having difficulty learning obviously a new language in honestly only 3 years, and for Heron's 3 years is probably only a couple months, so she's very new to it. I think that it's at its worst, and this has nothing to do with the voice quality. I really, really love her voice acting. It's at its worst in Heroes with Azura and Leanne's duo conversation, where it just kind of feels like Azura is kind of speaking to a toddler, and even though I think the quality of what they're saying, when I can like think about like what they're saying back and forth, is interesting, and I did like that alt because it gave Nyla and Leanne more interactions, and that's great because they're half sisters. So, you know, it's cool that she's like, oh yeah, and you know, Nyla's part of my family too. So, you know, that's cool. That's just a aside, is that I think that if they ever localize these games, I think that the ancient tongue is going to be like, I'd be interested in how they do it, because it is what I think is a very interesting part of this game, but I wonder how much it like relies on like text. Like, we know what the ancient language sounds like, we know what it looks like, but we don't have like a one-to-one. So yeah, that kind of became more of a thing about the ancient language, because I think the ancient language is interesting in that it also ties into Volig's character. So yes, that's my feelings on Leanne. I really like her. I guess I'm gonna talk about Zihark. Zihark is a character I really like. We'll put him next to, I don't know, looking at this now, I feel tempted to put Nephany down, because do I like Nephany that much? I mean, I really like her, but I don't like love her. I don't know, I look at everybody else in the tier and I'm like, I think I like them a little more than Nephany, so we'll put her in great, but like a high grade. There we go. But back to Zihark. Zihark is, oh, he just makes me really sad. I think for me, you know, there are characters that you look at them and you're like, they're never going to fall in love again. And that's Zihark. It's just like, he's very silent about it. One scene I really like is, you know, Ike going up to him and being like, I didn't think somebody would, come to the Lagoo's aid in Toa, because he's just trying to grapple with what he saw. And it's not like Nazir, who's like, yeah, I'm a Lagoo's myself. It's like, he was like, oh, what are you doing? And Zihark's like, are you okay if I just don't want to talk about it? I really like that. I don't know. He's like, I don't want to talk about it if it's okay for me to have this to myself. And I really like that. I feel like a lot of characters, especially in recent games, kind of end up like having to like, I hate saying this, but like kind of trauma dump to everyone. And I kind of like the Zihark, like his feelings and his, past relationship. I think in the English version, they just said that they couldn't be together anymore. But in the Japanese version, they pretty explicitly say that his fiance, I think, or girlfriend, who was a Lagoo's, was killed. So, I like that he's able to like kind of privately feel this way while publicly doing something to help the Lagoo's. And I think he only talks about it with Muaram. I don't think he tells anybody else. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. It doesn't. It feels like kind of more realistic that Zihark has these thoughts privately, and he's not like, "Hi, everyone. Someone I loved very dearly got killed in like racial violence." I don't know. Also, he's a great unit, and I like his design. So that's another point for Zihark. The other thing about Zihark, sorry, one last thing is, in the art book, it's similar to Jill, where him defecting out of the Daean army is canon. So I think that that's very interesting. So, that comes across like Jill and Mist's relationship, but it also speaks a lot to like Zihark. I mean, gameplay-wise, you should probably never have him defect, because then you have to do 313 without him. But, like, at least, like, story-wise, I really like that he has that sort of arc where he's like, I can't keep doing this. Let's talk about another character in Path of Radiance who joins the Great Time. I'm gonna put Marcia in Great. I really don't have a lot of feelings about her that would be above someone in this tier. I just think she's cute, so she's gonna be a tier above. Marcia's cute. I think that unfortunately a lot of her story gets kind of bogged down by being associated with Makalov. So, it's very unfortunate that I'm like, I kind of wish she got just a little bit more outside of that. And it kind of feels like she's being kind of pushed two ways by like Makalov, who's like her family, who's dragging her down, and Tanith, who's like her superior, who's kind of pushing her another way. Also, on some level, I find it, kind of mildly annoying that like all of the Benyon cast kind of all moved to Crimea. And I know it's like gameplay utility, part 2, and like the like 2 Jeffrey chapters kind of needed more units. So you get like Marcia, you get Devdin, you get Makalov, you get Astrid and Callow. So they're like, oh, we're all gonna move to Crimea. I find that mildly annoying because I'm like, how do I describe this? Because I kind of transparently know exactly why they did it, it doesn't feel very natural to me. And because they were associated with Benyon and you're fighting Benyon like the entire game, like the other characters associated with Benyon, you don't get into like the final part of the game, like Sigrun and Tinith. You're like, okay, well, I guess all of these people have to move nations. Unlike, like the Daean people like Zihark and Jill and Torneo, you're like, oh, that makes sense. Marcia, I actually do like that she, if it wasn't for the fact that, like, Makalov was also part of the Crimean army, I would really like that she moves to Crimea. For me, I'm like, if Makalov wasn't a part of it, it would actually make Marcia's arc pretty interesting. In that, I feel like she's kind of pulled in one direction by Tanith, and she's pulled in another direction by Makalov. So I think the potential of her moving to Crimea and kind of making her own life would have been really cool. And I kind of wish that they had kind of spun it more like that, instead of just being like, well, we need to move all the Benyon people to Crimea. I think that it seemed like a very natural decision for Marcia, and I kind of wish that they had made it kind of her own decision. That's kind of all I wanted to say. I really like Marcia. I think she's funny. I've never successfully kind of made her a good unit, but I know a lot of people who have, and I really want to kind of try it one of these days, but I don't know. I think that she's just kind of a victim of a few plot lines that I don't find very interesting. But I think her by herself, just her personality is very cute. Visually, she's like such a callback to Est, even though she's like your early game Pegasus Knight. I don't know, I like the pink. I don't think I can put her any higher, but there's definitely no reason to put her lower, because I do definitively just like her better than everyone in this tier. Let's talk about Bastion. I think Bastion is a character that would really benefit from the game was dubbed. I feel like if the game was dubbed, I think I would like Bastion a lot more, because I think his shtick, that's, you know, he's always kind of rhyming, he's always kind of like waxing poetic like lyrics, is very funny in concept, but you know, it's not very interesting when you're just kind of reading it. So I feel like if he was dubbed, and like I was kind of experiencing the game through that, I would find him a lot more interesting. The other thing is that unfortunately he does get bogged down by, I just don't like that he and Lucia can get married. There's no other reason, I just don't like it. But I do like his plotline with, you know, Renning and Volke in Path of Radiant Dawn. Heroes had that one voting jubilee that was like, who would be a good detective duo? And it was like Bastion and Volke actually got like top 10 or something. That was funny. I don't know. Bastion is a character that I could see myself liking more. If he was given like a dub treatment, similar to like how much like voiceover really made me like Pandreo, for example, I can see myself liking Bastion a lot more. Because I think a lot of his, you know, structure is interesting. It's just, I'm not wowed by him. We'll put Volke. Volke's great. You know what? Volke, I really like it. He is funny as hell. It is, I don't know. He not only, I think he embodies two good aspects, which is a character, to me, should be plot relevant and also very entertaining. Either entertaining through being very cool or being very funny. Volke manages to be both. He's plot relevant. I love the past with Grail, and like the payoff to being like, I want you to, if I ever go berserk again, you need to kill me. Or if I'm dead through any other reason, you should tell this all to my son. And then he like turns into an assassin. That's like the second best scene in Path of Radiance, I think. I don't know, it's so cool. And then, the fact that he, like, charges you each time he, like, loots, and he's like, Ike's like, can you eat with the rest of the crew? Volke's like, I'll do it for, like, $100,000. And Ike's like, that's so stupid. I'll tell Miss he died. Volke's funny, and he's cool, and he's plot relevant in a really interesting plot thread. So, Volke's in really, like, again, I'm saying this a billion times, his dub in Heroes, his dub voice acting is fantastic. I really actually, you know, Shinon got a random seasonal. I really want Volke to get a random seasonal. Because that's the only way I know that, like, characters we're going to hear them dubbed again. I really want Volke to get another ult. Or any other unit. Give him an assassin ult, maybe an attuned ult. I don't know. I really like his voice. Putting Volke over Nephany, okay. I'm okay with that. Okay. I guess we'll just do Renning. Renning exists. You know, I think in an alternate universe where I was like, this guy is so hot, he would probably be higher. He exists. I think he's kind of a means to an end for a plotline. But, you know, I don't really feel any way about him other than that. I think the Bertram plotline, put Bertram next to him. It's an interesting plotline in theory, I just don't care about it. I think it kind of only exists to, like, kind of make you feel better about Alencia. You know, losing everything, kind of coming into her own as a person, and then finding out that she didn't actually lose everything. That's sweet. I like that. It's kind of like Raphael, why I'm like, I can't be mad about them kind of pulling Raphael out of a hat and being like, here's another Heron. It's great that they're with each other. Cool. So, you know, I can't be mad about Renning. There's no reason I dislike Renning. He exists. I don't know. In an alternate future where I'm like, this guy's really hot, I'd probably put him higher. His voice acting in here is also fantastic. Bertram exists. He's definitely one of the 4 writers. Bryce, I don't know. Can I put Bryce over Shinon? I can't put him in awful. He exists. These two are really, you know, it's the 4 writers of Dayan, but it might as well be 2 writers of Dayan. Let's put Petrine on the board. I'm gonna put Petrine that high, honestly, kind of no reason other than she's hot. She's really terrible, but I do kind of like that we get more characters who are branded kind of on the kind of the spectrum of like, you know, there's Micaiah, who's kind of virtuous and is like, I've never hated the Lagoos, you know, like, how could I feel that way? There's Soren, who's like, because I didn't realize I was branded, I felt such a hatred, because for some reason, when I was a very small child who was starving, every single Lagoos did not want to help me. Every single one of them. So I was like, of course you're going to grow a hatred towards someone who does not recognize your very existence. So he, you know, by the time Radiant Dawn rolls around to the end of Radiant Dawn, he completely feels differently. You know, he goes through that character arc. So on the spectrum, you have like Micaiah, you have Soren, and probably Zelgius, who's, you know, best friend slash partner slash maybe husband, is also a Lagoos. And then you get like, you start getting people like Stefan who have a very good relationship with specific Lagoos, but holds a deep hatred for like Gallia as a kingdom and how much it, let's just move Stefan up here. Who holds a very deep hatred for Gallia as a kingdom and how much it does not recognize branded people. To the point where he's like, I don't, you know, there's Benyon, and I hate the Beorc, but I also hate the Lagoos for being like, so, you know, it's like both sides of the spectrum that, you know, I'm half of this and half of this, and it's just like neither side recognizes me. And to the point where he's like, I could pretend to be a Beorc and like Beorc will be nice to me. I can never pretend to be a Lagoos or a Beorc to Lagoos. Stefan's support with Mordecai is fantastic. In his support with Yoon, I'm so glad you get to see that regardless of whether you've recruited him or not. One, it's very funny that he is like, I'm gonna go talk to the goddess and I'm not gonna join your team. Two, it is single-handedly the most important conversation in the entire game. So because Petrine kind of represents that side of that conflict with Stefan, and they both have, you know, obviously Petrine's like a terrible person, but like you kind of understand why she would feel that way because you have Stefan in your party. And, you know, my bold little thing is if I could add 1 or 2 plot details to these games to be added, if they were ever remade, the first one would be not killing off Zelgius because I don't think he deserves it. 2, I'd actually kind of want to see what it'd be like if Petrine survived Path of Radiance and went to live with Stefan in his village. Not like a wife situation, but like if she was around her fellow branded in like a community of like them, like just them, how would she feel about that? Because, you know, we can already see like Micaiah instantly kind of bonded with Stefan, and he was like, I'll do anything I can to protect you, I just recognize you as one of my own. Same with like Soren, if he wasn't so attached to Ike, he'd be slightly inclined to be like, maybe, but I know where I belong. And Stefan's like, well, you could belong somewhere else, just it's there. Go to the Grand Desert. Maybe this is kind of getting fanfiction-y, but no, I'd really like to see what would happen if Petrine was kind of given that chance. But obviously she's not a good person, and she looks hot doing it. So that's another aspect of I really like Petrine. So Petrine's that high, Stefan's that high. Torneo, I like. I don't think I can put him any higher. His support with Rolf is so good. It like actually makes me extremely emotional. And I think his kind of plotline with, he was part of like this legacy. One, I think it's cute that him and Grail are like actually friends. I think that's very cute. And because he heard like, oh yeah, Grail died and Ike's here, I'm not gonna hurt Ike. I'll join him. I can't let Sir Gawain's sword style die with him. So, there's kind of like that. I think it's cute that the previous 4 writers were actually like friends compared to whatever's going on with Bertram and Bryce and Petrine and the Black Knight. Speaking of, Petrine absolutely should have gone to Winteralt when Zelgius did, and she should have been Krampus, because that would have been funny. What else? I was talking about Torneo. Yeah, Torneo is a character I wish I liked more because I think what's there is actually pretty interesting. I like that he, you know, when he is, if he fights Ashnard, he's like, they're going to call me Torneo the King Killer. I think that's what he says. And then he can kill Tellius. That's crazy. That's so interesting. But like, you know, I think I was reading the recollection and Torneo's page says something like, it's kind of like the writers admitting that they forgot about this plotline, which is kind of funny and also a little sad. They're like, you know, it's unknown if he ever saw his son again and wife. And you're like, okay, but you could have written that in, Radiant Dawn. I think they forgot about it. It's really sad, but, you know, the part when he was like, my son was almost beaten to death by King Ashnard, and he's heavily disabled now. And all I could think about was, you know, I'm from a very old military family in Dayan, and all I could think about was, you know, when can he get back out there? And, you know, obviously my wife was so disgusted and she, like, left for Crimea. And, you know, I think about that and that makes me so sad because, you know, Rolf's like, why don't you just go say you're sorry? You know, you still have time. And then, like, Radiant Dawn rolls around, they completely forget about it. And then they're like, who knows if he ever saw him again? I'm like, okay. I kind of, you know, I kind of want you to, I'm kind of, you know, another thing, that if I was in charge of, you know, a remake, or even just kind of like asked, what should we add? I'd be like, something, just add it to his epilogue. Add it to his epilogue that he, like, went back and reunited with his family. Maybe things weren't like, we'll be a family together, but he kept in contact with them. That's enough. That's enough. Anyway, Torneo isn't a character I care about particularly, but I think he's interesting. I think there's definitely very interesting aspects of his character arc that kind of make me, when I think about them separately and like in tandem like this, I'm like, oh, is Torneo like really cool? And then every time I'm like forced to use him, I'm like, I don't care. So there's that aspect. I don't like passing on the responsibility of killing Tellius onto Torneo. I don't feel like that's something Micaiah would do. But I feel like they added that, one, just so you'd have an option other than, I'll kill you. So when they add the other option, you're like, oh, there's a third option. Just like Conquest, Birthright Revelation. You're like, oh, I'm gonna join Smash. No, I like, but like, I also like the Kingslayer thing. Ashnard is a character I want to like more, but I don't hate him. I think his aura itself is cool. I'm mad that he, you know, it should have been me, not him situation with Almeida. It's just like, there's this ugly ass guy, and Almeida's like, I really believed in him, his vision of the future, and you're like, oh, your ugly ass Republican boyfriend. And he's just kind of a bland character compared to like a lot of the other villains in Tellius, but he's cool. At the same time, you're like, I cannot deny that Ashnard is kind of cool. Obviously, it's unbelievably evil to like ride on your, you know, feral brother-in-law. Not they weren't married, but and like kind of like, it's almost kind of like dragging around a corpse, but he's still alive. That's like unbelievably irreprehensibly evil. But you're like, I kind of can't deny that's a little cool. So if somebody said, I really like Ashnard because he's cool, I'd be like, yeah, he's cool. But I don't think my personal affection for him is like as high. But obviously I can like really evil characters because I put Petrine that high. Let's do the rest of the dragons. We're gonna put Almeida at the top of memorable really love. No, I'm gonna put her at the bottom of faves. Almeida's awesome. What else can I really say about Almeida? It's just like, her plotline is like one of the best parts of Radiant Dawn. It's one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite games in the series. And one of my favorite games of all time. You know, there's some plot lines in that game that I'm like, Radiant Dawn is like the best game of all time. And Almeida's plotline is one of them. It's, you know, I just don't feel like they write a lot of female characters like they write Almeida. And I would have said that a bit more definitively before Engage. I actually think Zephy is another character that I kind of like how, you know, they made such a flawed character that you're like, they kind of didn't really cut corners, kind of making you feel bad about her. But like, obviously, you know, things were not great for them. Also, I feel like she's really similar to Lumera. I really want a Lumera in Almeida harmonic unit. That would be amazing, because the way Almeida feels about Tellius, but actually Soren, is the way that Lumera feels about Alir. It's like, I've been waiting so long for you, to the point of like, I am kind of hinging my entire ability to feel fulfilled and not lonely anymore on finding my child again. What's really sad is like, Lumera doesn't really get to like, you know, be with Alir for more than like, what I was like, maybe it's a few days, but like Heroes confirmed it was a few hours. It was literally like an afternoon into like night. That's crazy. Almeida only gets to say hi to her son, not she's his mother, and just content that he feels like he's found his way in the world. And you know, you're thinking, how many more hundreds of years is Almeida going to live? Having that be like the only time she's ever talked to her son, and just having to like be happy that he like was found a way to be happy in the world. That's so sad to me. Oh my god. That has no, you know, that's not even to like do with like, you know, how interesting the entire like plotline with her brother and like Ashnard, and how Degencia like lost both of his children very quickly, and how he was like, that was the only, you know, Degencia's entire promise to the goddess that he would not let the world turn to war was like the only thing keeping him sane, and that's why he was so staunchly like, no war, we have to do anything we can not to do war, because he was like, I can't, you know, you have to imagine how traumatizing that could have been for Degencia. And that's kind of like actually another thing that I was like, I know Almeida's not a playable character. I wish she got an epilogue tag. I wish we got to see more of how she felt being in Goldoa, going back there after, you know, 20 years is not a lot for a dragon, but it is a lot for somebody who's probably lived, you know, in seclusion, but like among Beorg. That's probably, you know, going back, you know, being able to be with like her new, what would it be, nibbling? Yeah, it's her brother's child. Her dead brother's child. So sad. And then her little brother, who's now king, and she, you know, she's never gonna see her son again. And then her dad's dead now. He's dead. And you're like, oh, this woman has gone through the ringer. But like, you kind of, at the same time, you're like, she kind of sucks. And that's interesting. Like, they don't make you kind of, they don't, you know, you go through all of this and you're like, this is such a sad situation to go through. But also she shared a lot of Ashnard's like ideals and was like, I thought he was the perfect guy to lead the world. And you are like, oh, King Ashnard? Okay. It's just like, it's the kind of person that you're like, Another character that really reminds me of her is Lucretia from Final Fantasy VII, Georgia Cerberus, where you meet like an undeniably flawed person, but because she's kind of suffered so much and kind of like the whole like, you know, I didn't get to hold my son even once, you're like, oh, I feel so bad for her. And it's just much more interesting of a character that she does not exist only to be pitied, because she's allowed to be flawed and pitied. Like, kind of a victim, but not a perfect victim. You're not ever like, oh, poor baby, because Almeida's like, obviously, like, you know, at one point she calls, I think she calls Micaiah like a harlot and tries to stab her. So there's that. But like, you're also like, well, Micaiah did kill Tellius, but it was like his, you know, request. I don't know. Almeida's great. She's fantastic. I think she is like one of the reasons Radiant Dawn is such a good game. I really like Degencia. I think he is probably the best like kind of older dragon like character in that I have of the games I've played. And I was really I think because of my timeline project, I was just very impressed with how you know, it's not like Degenshi's not like a perfect person, because you look at him and you're like, why did you try to be like, slavery's okay to like Laurent? And Laurent's like, no, I don't want to talk to you. What are you talking about? You know, and kind of Nazir had the same thing, being like, well, you know, well, if you go back really far, and I'm like, well, you know, obviously that's that history of like, maybe Laguz subjugated Beork like hundreds of years ago, maybe 1,000 years ago. That doesn't, you know, kind of what Ike was like, that doesn't, you know, make up for what's happening today. And that's kind of like the curse of longevity of like, there's some characters in these games that's such an interesting plotline that they have lived way too long. They've lived way too long, and because they have perspective, they're not very in touch with like how things are done today. You think of everything that they've been through and you're like, I don't think any of your actions were illogical at the time, but in the current day, I don't think you're extremely in touch. And that wouldn't be a problem if they didn't have power. So you're like, because you have power and you're out of touch, you're wielding it in the wrong way. So, you know, Degenshiya is such an interesting character to me, because I was like, you know, he tried so hard to like, he like sponsored like a lot of peace talks to try to get them to not talk. He helped Gallia create a kingdom. You know, Degenshiya tried legitimately. He helped, like, he kept Laurent with him for like hundreds of years. You can understand Degenshiya's position, but obviously he went about things the wrong way. And I think that's interesting. He's also cool as hell. He's a big old dragon. His voiceover in the English version, I think it might be the same person in both the Japanese Heroes and Radiant Dawn. His English voiceover is so different from Radiant Dawn and Heroes. In Heroes, it's a lot softer. I would love to hear his Heroes voice actor do a lot of his Radiant Dawn voice lines. I would love to hear that, because I'm like, I really want to hear his take. I really want Degenshiya to get a mythic unit. I think he's cool. I think he's one of my favorite old man kind of dragon characters. Kurthnaga, there's kind of no reason, because I think he is kind of the least interesting version of all of his siblings. But I just think he's sweet. I think he's cute. You know, I like that scene with him and Ike. I like how much he looks like Soren. It was definitely like the kind of the first curveball the game gave you. But he doesn't look that much like Soren in Path of Radiance. But in Radiant Dawn, it's like the same exact portrait. That's funny. I like, that one early scene with him and Micaiah in Radiant Dawn. He was like, Micaiah, you're not asking me about who I am at all. And she's like, if you're not volunteering it, there's no reason to like, you know, push it out of you. You know, everyone's got secrets they want to keep. You know, I like that he was inspired by Ike and he wanted to go out. Obviously, he didn't really know about like the whole like Goldoa. If Goldoa doesn't involve itself, and because Kurthnaga like jumped out to like be like, I need to help people, I think because he's associated with a ton of other characters I like, he's kind of pushed up higher. He's not a very good unit. And he's probably the least interesting version of all of his siblings, but I really like Kurthnaga. Rajayan. It's so close to putting him on faves. I think I'm going to put him near the top of memorable, really love. I think Rajayan is an interesting character because we never meet the guy. I mean, he says like 3 lines before he dies, but like we never, like, there's no flashback scenes of him like talking or anything when he was like alive and healthy. Gotta interrupt myself real quick. Another thing is Rajayan is hot. He's like the hottest Fire Emblem man to me. Like if I'm like thinking of like the most attractive men in any Fire Emblem game, it's Rajayan first, and then like, you know, I can like start going down, but like absolutely no one is hotter than Rajayan for like male characters. He's the hottest male character in this game. He's gorgeous. He is gorgeous. Do you see this? He's hot. Okay, sorry. Getting back to what I was saying. The whole plotline with Almeida and Rajayan is very sad. When you think about it in retrospect, the whole like feeling of Soren not being wanted growing up. He was like a branded child. He was kind of like used for his magic, and then nobody in Gallia wanted to speak to him, and he never kind of found a place to belong before he met Ike. And that no one like truly wanted him, and he didn't have a community or a family. So I think that, like, you know, that not only kind of enriches and makes Almeida's story sadder, it also makes, you know, Rajayan, you know, his story a lot more tragic, because, you know, we're told that, you know, Rajayan he wouldn't have wanted, you know, people to hate Almeida for like the mistakes she did, and he never resented her. He was really only thinking about her safety and his nephew safety. So, you know, if you think about the fact that like Rajayan like literally like was effectively like imprisoned for like 20 years, imprisoned and tortured, just to be able to save his nephew, you know, that kind of in retrospect makes you know, Soren's whole situation so much sadder. So, you know, Rajayan isn't really a character. He has like 3 voice lines, but like, because he like kind of embodies a lot of virtues, that, I don't know, that really sticks out to me. Also, the scene with him and Ina at the end of Path of Radiance is probably one of my favorite scenes in, I don't know, maybe not just Path of Radiance, maybe any Fire Emblem game. So, yeah, Rajayan not only is handsome, he's very virtuous, very tragic, memorable character. Let's do Ina next. We'll do all the dragons. I'm gonna put Ina in really like. I think that, she's like a high really like. We'll put her above Mia. I think the whole story with all of the dragons is just very interesting. You know, like the entire tangled sort of family drama. It's so interesting. I really love how much they focused on the dragons in this game, and it wasn't just like one person. You know, because a lot of dragons in Fire Emblem games kind of embody loneliness. Because, you know, they are kind of representing like that legacy that Tiki created. That like, oh, to be a dragon in this world is kind of a lonely existence. Because you'll outlive everyone you know. Which I think is interesting with Goldoa, because you've kind of created like a community of people. Like, people know each other. Like, there's a family unit happening. So, you know, while characters like Almeida or Degencia might represent loneliness, there is sort of like that whole family of connection there. That it makes the interweaving of the web very interesting. So, Ina's story in Path of Radiance is really, really memorable to me. You know, not only because, to me, I think she's another character that, you know, you think about the amount of people that, like, were probably, you know, killed because of King Ashnard, and, like, how Ina probably, assisted both him and Petrine, because she was like, you know, I just want to be near Rajayan. So, you know, that is to some degree selfish, but it's also like, she just did everything because she wanted to be near her fiance, even if he does not remember her. And that's, you know, that's a very beautiful story to me. I also like, you know, the very kind of subtle, like, suggestion that dragons are very good at strategy, which, you know, you could probably see, maybe that's why, Soren is a rare talent or something, because Ina is Petrine's strategist. Yeah, I think Ina is a character that just sticks in my mind really well. I think I like how kind of tempered she is. I really like her conversation with Almeida in Radiant Dawn, where she's like, obviously, you get the sense that not everything is settled within Ina's mind, but she's like, I don't hate you. Rajayan wouldn't want me to, and so I'm not going to. But you can still see, you know, it's not like everything's perfectly fine. Anyway, you know, sometimes it's like, you think about how many people we've lost in this family unit by the end of Radiant Dawn, and I just like that she comes out of it being like, at least I have a child. You know, that I don't think that that's like, oh, it was all worth it. But, you know, it's a nice silver lining. So, you know, Almeida can be an aunt and Kurthnaga can be an uncle. So, you know, that's sweet. I just gassed up this entire plotline with the dragons. I'm gonna put Nazir kind of low. I'm just gonna put him in great. And I recognize I'll put him at the top of great. This is a personal affection list, and I think Nazir's such a good character, but he's almost completely ruined by that scene where he goes up to Almeida, and he's like, everything, this was all your fault. This was exclusively your fault. And then, like, later, even Dickensi is not even mad at Almeida. He, like, asks her to forgive him. So you're like, Nazir, what the hell are you doing? He's like, slut-shaming her? Ugh. Everything in Path of Radiance, I think, I really love this. You know, the whole thing with, wanting to do everything for Ina, being like, I'll double-cross a billion people, just so my granddaughter can, like, be with her loved ones again. So sweet. You get, stuff like him being somebody who actually left Agencia because he did not agree with him. And being, that's very interesting. So you get, Nazir is a cool character, and you might actually, I think that he's actually more long-lived than Dickensia. And so that it's interesting that he survives Radiant Dawn, because it's like, the whole, like, the old part of the world has gone away and the new part is gone, but Nazir's still around, so that's interesting. I guess you could kill him off, but, you have to get the canon ending by keeping Nazir alive. Yeah, it literally is just that. It is literally just the scene with Almeida that, like, tanks him a little bit. He'd probably be next to Ina if not for that. But that makes me so mad. He's like, I can't believe you left because you didn't agree with Dickensia's policies. And I'm like, you literally left before her. What are you talking about? Anyway, a beautiful design. I want him in Heroes so bad. I hope he's voiced by Koyasu. Beautiful design. If it literally wasn't for that scene, he might actually be, like, the second tier based off of character design alone. And especially in Radiant Dawn. His sprite is gorgeous in Radiant Dawn. Yeah, I wish I liked him a little more. It's not like I think that makes him a bad character, but it pisses me off a little. So, Gareth exists. There's nothing else to really say about Gareth. He exists. He's Kurthnaga's attendant, and that's sweet. And that's about it. Gareth, I like his design. He exists. We'll put Tellius in memorable really love. I have a lot of friends who, like, love Tellius, like, he's their favorite character. So I keep thinking, I don't really like Tellius that much, but it's not because I really like Tellius. It's just, like, when you're faced with, like, stans, it's the comparison that fails you. You're like, oh, because I don't stan Tellius, it must mean I don't like him very much. And you're like, no, I'm comparing him to people who, like, consider him their favorite characters. No, I really, really like Tellius. I think his story is it's one of the best parts of Radiant Dawn. And I keep saying that about it, but, no, I think the three best plot lines in Radiant Dawn is the whole dragon thing that kind of involves Tellius and Soren, too. So, the reveal, there is one thing that I do think is kind of sad about Pelleas' ending. I do kind of wish that, like, it wasn't like, well, I'm not your real son, so bye forever. That was a little sad to me. I'm like, even if Almeida, she did care for him, though. She did worry, spend time agonizing, and give him a lot of affection, even if he's not her biological child. I feel like that is a thing that I'm like, she can have two sons. She can have two beautiful little sons. So that's kind of my feeling about Tellius. That's, like, my only nitpick. Otherwise, I think he's a really good character. I do think it's kind of... Okay, I'm gonna go into this when I talk about Zelgius, but, like, I do think Radiant Dawn is a story that's not supposed to be, like... even though tragedy happens, it's not supposed to be a tragedy. Like, kind of in the way that, like, Three Houses in, like, Shadows of Valentia is, in some respects. Like, some characters have to die, and that's just the plot line. Like, as much as I love Berkut, like, I wouldn't want, like, a version of Shadows of Valentia where he survives. Unless it was, like, anything other than, like, NAU. Like, it's not something that's happening in the story. Like, I'd be really happy if Berkut got a Realmed alt or something. that he's like, yeah, you know, I'm redeemed. I'd be happy about that. I'd be really happy. But I wouldn't want it in the story, because I do feel like the tragedy is the interesting part. Radiant Dawn, I don't feel like is a game where, like, tragedy needs to happen. Tragedy has happened, but, like, I don't feel like it needs to happen to facilitate more of the plot. So I like that Tellius gets to live. I feel like it's weird that Zelgius has to die, especially with everything else going on. You know, with Yoon talking to Ashera and saying branded people are like the reason that like humanity can live on without us. You know, like, because humankind has already evolved past what we have created with our hands, simply just the Laguz and Beork, that means that they'll be fine without us. So because the game puts so much of an emphasis on, you know, branded people are not, you know, cursed people who are born and they should die. It is, life can exist without the goddess's intervention, and like kind of like the whole like children can grow past their parents, like, you know, kind of like with Almeida in Soren, like her letting Soren go, not like saying I'm your mother, I'm gonna be here, I'm gonna hug you, being like, I'm happy he's found his way in the world, that's it. Same with Laurent and all of the apostle bloodline, being like, they have existed and they have flourished without me. He, you know, even though his power was, you know, he lost a part of himself to facilitate that. That is a beautiful legacy. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah, so I feel like it's a little cruel that like Zelgius has to die, because you get his backstory after, and I don't feel like it. I feel like the narrative would have been stronger if he lived somehow. But like, I think it's great that Tellius doesn't have to die, and in fact, like, the game is like, the story is stronger for it, because I do feel like, despite like the tragedy that has happened with the Serenus Forest and like Vergion and all of like the people who have died to like for the plot to kind of get to this point, the game is hopeful in nature. So I'm really happy. Like, I think that Tellius, like, his death scene is very effective, and I feel like experiencing that at least once is good. If Radiant Dawn had a way to skip enemy phase, it would, you know, I would be 100% on board with, you have to experience the story twice. It's because Radiant Dawn is such a long game that I'm like, should I tell people to, you know, like, download the second playthrough mod when they play this game? Or it's kind of like that. I'm like, but I do feel like you need to experience the tragedy of Tellius dying in order to like kind of get the message of hope. Because I also feel like it's, you know, Tellius is a very effective part of Micaiah's story, and how, like, you know, they very purposely kind of propped up Micaiah as being like, you know, the second Ike. So they, like, you know, very much like were forcing Tellius to be like the second Alencia, and being like, well, we'll just do the same thing that like bolstered Crimea's morale. And what ended up happening is actually backfired and like made Micaiah kind of like the hero, and like Tellius was not as loved by the people. And that's interesting. So you know, Tellius getting to live and be his own person, because a lot of people are like sad that Tellius didn't become ruler, and I'm like, well, I feel like him kind of like not following a path that other people have chosen for him would have been better, especially since he wasn't a very good ruler either. You know, very good person, sweet person, he can do a lot. I probably shouldn't be king. He doesn't have any qualifications, and he's not popular. So, Tellius, yeah, memorable, really loved. He is part of one of the best parts of Radiant Dawn, and I think he's a great character. I just talked about Zelgius a bit. Should I rank him, or should I kind of keep it towards the end? I'll save him for one of the end. We'll do Laura. I like Laura. She's got a cute design. There's really not much more to say about her, other than she's cute. And that's about it, and I like her because she's cute. Great. Eren exists, or his Japanese name, Brad. Yeah, I don't have an opinion on him. He exists. I wouldn't say I have any feelings about his design. He exists as a functional unit for the maps that he's on, and he's not cute. So he exists. I don't dislike him. Good for him. If they remade this game and gave him a bunch of supports and made me really like him, then great. I would welcome that. For now, he just exists. Volig, great. I really like Volig. Volig's great. I don't think I can put him in really like, but no, I think he's funny. I think he's very funny. The whole thing where he's like, actually, I kind of prefer to be a dog. Like, when it first happened, Nyla was like, this is a way for, like, him to, like, walk around with you without people thinking he's a Lagoose. We'll just keep him transformed all the time. You can say he's your dog. And Makai was like, that is so demeaning. I do not want to do that. And he was like, no, it's fine. And they were like, it's fine. And she was like, this feels weird. And then Volek was like, I've done this for months. I like being a dog. Also, his translated his lines, if you translate them from the ancient language to like the modern tongue, he's funny. He's so funny. He's like, what if I like tried to like threaten to eat this guy? He's funny. Har, great. I don't think I can put Har higher than. Okay, I'm thinking of like. I don't know how much I think about Har other than he's just a very good unit and he's funny. Because he does have the whole plotline with Shaharam, and I think that that's a very interesting relationship that they have. But, like, do I have much to say about it other than, he's an interesting mentor for Jill. Never should have had a paired ending with her. How old is Jill in Path of Radiance? She's 17. Har's like 35. No. You kidding me? No. But and he's known her dad before she was even born. No, that's not happening. Weird. No, that doesn't affect really my perception of Har because they like rolled that back in the art book. They were like because it doesn't make any sense because they both have conversations with Ike and Makai where they're like, is something going on? And they're like, no. And like Jill was like a little more like, it's not like that. But like Har was like, she's my dead mentor's daughter. No. And then they're like, paired ending, and you're like, what? And then the art book was like, yeah, no, we're going back to what was written in the base conversations. It's literally just that like he's kind of like an uncle to her. So that's my feelings on Jill and Har. It's a big no. It doesn't really affect my opinion of Har at all, though. I can't really say anything about him other than he's funny, and he's a very good unit. Like, if you're not using him in Radiant Dawn, you are hitting the hard button. Even on normal mode. You are like, why would you not use Har? And I didn't use Har because I used Jill. And if you're not using Jill or Har, you're hitting the extra hard button. Har's funny. His conversations in the endgame, Radiant Dawn, he's funny as hell. I would die for General Zelgius. Yeah, Levile, you will. Great. I really like his design. Can I put him? I'll put him in really like. I think I do like him a lot more than a lot of the other characters in this tier. The line between like these three characters and these three characters is pretty thin. You could probably move them up and down. Har's cool. What else is there to say? Shaharam. Let's do Shaharam next. Great. We'll put Shaharam in great tier. I think Path of Radiance has the most amount, and Radiant Dawn has the most amount of just completely unmemorable one-chapter bosses in the entire series. Like, you're like, oh, who is this guy? Who cares? Shaharam is part of one of the best plot lines in Path of Radiance, which is Jill's entire character arc is so good. And because Shaharam is a very essential part of that, it makes, it makes it all that much richer. Other than that, it's just, like, interesting that he was like, well, I was disgusted with the Benyon Senate, but, like, Dan isn't that much better, and we're not treated very well. And so he was like, I can't do the Senate's dirty work, but I'm doing Ashnard's dirty work. And he's literally ordered to, like, flood people's homes and stuff. And like he, indoctrinate his daughter into like this belief system that he knows is wrong. Interesting. I think, Shaharam, because the fact that I'm even saying anything about him means he's in great. And then, there's also that whole plot line of like in Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn about like parents and stuff and like, like things evolving past where they've started. So like, children becoming better than their parents. And that's kind of what Jill represents, versus like Shaharam. And that's why, Shaharam's great. He's very memorable. Let's talk about more like minor bosses. Jared exists. I don't hate him. I might hate him for a lot of art he gets with Micaiah, but no opinion. He exists as a foil, and he dies. He kills innocent people in the street, but he tunnel visions so hard on like being like, well, I have to destroy Dayan, and you're like, you're not being paid enough for this, Jared. Why are you that evil? Jared exists. I don't really have an opinion about him. I literally didn't even build him up in Heroes. Did I even level him up to 40? I don't even think I did. I did that with Bertram. He exists. I don't care. Ludwig? We're gonna put him in awful. I like his art in Heroes. I like his voice in Heroes. I keep saying that. Me saying I like somebody's voice in Heroes just means that really stuck out to me. Everyone's voice in Heroes is great. Everyone's voice is great. I don't think anyone was miscast in Heroes. Just covering my bases. Ludwig, I like his art in Heroes. I like his voice. He sucks. he sucks. It's like, he's so creepy towards Lucia, and then he like tries to kill her. He's so creepy towards Alencia, then he tries to kill her. He completely lacks charisma. And he's not memorable, and he looks like a toe. So, who cares? Ludwig sucks. Izuka, awful. The whole Pharaoh plotline. Is that an interesting plotline? Yes. I will say, if Izuka wasn't evil and he was just like kind of an evil vizier character towards Tellius, he is legitimately very funny in part 1 of Radiant Dawn. It's very fun. I think he describes himself like, I went into a trance state and I meditated, and what came to me was this solution. And Micaiah was very quickly like, no, that's a stupid idea. There's mudslides. We shouldn't go there. And he was like, I prayed to the crystals. If it was literally just part 1 of Radiant Dawn without the feral drug, I would actually put Izuka higher because he's funny as hell. But because of the whole feral drug thing and like torturing Laguz, he gets put in awful. He's like the most abject evil character in like any Fire Emblem game. He sucks. There's that like weird bloody dungeon pit that they were like, this is so bad, we're not even gonna show what's in there, but it's like mangled bodies and that's all Izuka's fault. Terrible. Terrible person. Who else? We're running out of characters, I think. Oh, I didn't do Grail. Grail? We're gonna put him in really like. We're gonna put him next to Kennegus. Grail's, he is the best character. He's the best character. I think he's the best character in the parent who dies at the start of the game kind of archetype. Grail is interesting because you think, okay, yeah, Ike's dad dies at the beginning of the game, but like how else was he going to take over the mercenary company? Because you can't even like do the convoy at the beginning of the game. At the beginning of Path of Radiance, you're kind of guided towards being like, yeah, this was a necessary evil. It's like, how else is the game going to start if the protagonist's mentor or father doesn't die? Because it happens in like almost every game. And people are like, oh, it's going to happen. And I feel like almost to a point, it kind of reminds me of Lumera, where you're like kind of so expecting it that you're like a little desensitized to it. And then later in the game that you're like, there's a lot more to it. And in retrospect, you get a lot more upset about it. I think because of the depth that they gave Grail, and not only in Path of Radiance, but into Radiant Dawn, like his legacy touches, Ike and Zelgius so deeply that, it's like, it makes you wish that you weren't like kind of expecting it and being like, oh, finally it happened. And you're like, oh crap, you only had a few chapters with him. My only complaint about Grail is, you know, I might just be one of those people who does not have a dad like this. I don't like how he's kind of like rough and mean. Like kind of like that grumpy kind of like, boy, do you want a hot dog kind of guy. You know, I kind of wish he was like, you know, there's scenes where he's like kind of sweet towards Ike, and there's other scenes where like, I think like, and a lot of this is like cultural, which, you know, I'm American, so I think that I do not approve of this action. You know, I think in the Japanese version, Ike says, oh, you know, I tried to grab the medallion once and my dad, like, you know, harshly reprimanded me. That was the English version. The Japanese version, he said, oh, my father beat me. And you're like, what the hell? That makes me like Grail a little less. And I understand that, like, they changed that in the American version. It still kind of colors my vision of Grail. Is I'm like, because he's always like, you're being a little dumb right now. Maybe that's just like me. I'm like, I don't really like when characters, like parent figures, are like a little too harsh towards their kids. So Grail does actually lose a little. He loses some points for that. Otherwise, his plotline's great. The whole thing with the medallion. Elena's not on this list, or else she'd be right next to him. You know, the whole thing about with Zelgius being like, because he was a social pariah, literally the fact that Grail was like willing to be his friend made Zelgius kind of like worship the ground he walks on, because he was like the only person. Kind of similar to, actually very similar to Ike and Soren. Wow. Yeah. I'm gonna stick that in my hat and think about it. Like his relationship with Kennegus, I like his relationship with Titania. We really don't see a lot of his relationship with Shinon, but like Shinon's like obsessed with the guy. I think he is the best parent figure of any Fire Emblem game. And you know, I really like other characters like Makoto and Lumera, but Grail's fantastic. He's fantastic. He's kind of everything you want him to be in that role. I'm not gonna rank Grommel. I don't care about the Eat Rock guy. He's not gonna be on here. Who cares? Amy's funny, so we're gonna put her in great. I don't have anything else to say other than she's funny. Every scene she's in, you're like, this woman is insane and she's hot. Gay as fuck. I would have gone crazy over her. Amy's great. Okay, we're getting the home stretch. Yeah, so I guess we'll start with the most inconsequential character, which would be Amy. I like Amy. I think that she kind of exists to fill one narrative purpose. She only exists to facilitate that whole, like, branded people are the future thing. It makes Callo a more interesting, and Largo, sorry Largo, a more interesting character because they take Amy in knowing she's branded. And, you know, you remember, like, Callo in Tormod's Path of Radiance support when Callow's like, yeah, you know who branded people are? So you understand that was a deliberate decision on Callow's part to be like, yeah, this is a branded child. I know it's going to be hard, but like literally, like I'm willing to like. So that's interesting. The whole her surviving Asher's blast thing, again, because they did not flesh out that aspect of it in the English release with the whole extended script, it makes it seem like Amy is like secretly like Super Saiyan powerful. And she's not. It's literally just that like she's branded, and that's why like she didn't get blasted by the stone. So Amy kind of exists to just be like our first hint at like branded people will not turn to stone that you see later with like Stefan being like, I mean, we saw a blast in the sky, but everyone's fine. Because he lives in an all-branded village. And then, like, even Zelgius, like, directly goes up to Micaiah in the Japanese version and says, you will not turn to stone. So when Ashera blasts everybody else, you know, you will see everybody around you, you know, and he's like, I don't want you to see that, so why don't you come with me to the Tower of Guidance, and you won't have to see that. And she's like, I'm not gonna give up. So there's that whole plot line that, like, Amy existing and surviving. And, you know, obviously, like, there's the trauma of her seeing her dad turn to stone. But, like, you know, being able to make it to, you know, the Tower of Guidance, potentially with her mom if you put her in the same army, but Franolf if not. And it makes Callo a more interesting character. And that plot line is very interesting because it, like, kind of leads to the end of the game. I think a lot of people would be like, why the fuck? I don't have an opinion on this baby. I do, and I think she's cute. So we're gonna put Amy in gray. This is probably higher than anybody else would put him. I really like Leviathan. I know he kind of just exists as like a Zelgius simp, but as a Zelgius simp myself, I can't help but respect that. I think his design's cute. His battle conversations are very interesting. I think he's very noble. And, you know, sometimes I find those noble knight characters not very interesting, but I think because he's from the Benyon Empire and he, like, I think they said he works under Lacane and he, like, knew Astrid and everything, that just kind of comes across as more interesting because you're like, okay, if you're, like, working for Alencia, of course you're gonna be a noble person. She's Alencia. If you're working under Lacane and you're, like, have such strong set of morals, and you decide to be like, I cannot literally keep working for, like, Benyon as an empire. I want to follow, like, Zelgius as a person. If you're gonna be a simp, you gotta simp responsibly, and that's Leviathan. I also like that throughout part 3, you know, he's not like a one-chapter boss. He is present throughout part 3. Even if it's only to, like, kind of talk to Zelgius every other chapter, he's interesting. You know, you can see, like, he's, like, getting mad at Zelgius and being like, why would you not, like, kind of stand up to that? That's stupid. Zelgius is like, I'm a general. It's kind of my job to follow orders. And so because Leviathan is somebody who questions the status quo and isn't afraid to, like, kind of, like, be like, this isn't right, and he is unique in that amongst the Benyon army, to the point where he's like, no, I do really, you know, I think Zelgius is the last great knight. I would die for him. And he does. You know, I think you don't actually need to kill Leviathan to finish the chapter, so I choose to believe he doesn't die. I choose to believe that, because I think that would be sad, because Leviathan's he's a genuinely good person. So I really like him. Maybe it's because who he's simping for is also who I'm simping for, and I feel some solidarity there. Leviathan's great. Really like him. I'm literally putting him over Grail, who has got a lot more plot importance, but... Okay, I said I didn't have an opinion on the people, but I'm just gonna rank them anyways. They exist. There we go. Meow meow, hi. Okay, we are getting to the last few characters. So, we'll do South. I think he'd be top of really like, bottom of really memorable, of really love. My opinion on South flounders up and down quite a bit, and I don't know, I do like Leviathan better. I think I do like Leviathan better. Maybe I'm putting Leviathan in the wrong tier. Maybe I should, I don't know. Is this too high for Leviathan? You know, I don't think so, because I really do love Leviathan. We'll put South in this tier, and we'll put Leviathan next to him. I already said I was gonna judge Har, you know, for his parrot ending, so I don't really want to judge Micaiah and South for their parrot ending. At the same time, it's very obnoxious, and Heroes has kind of shoved it down everyone's throat, so it just makes me saltier about the prospect. Just, you know, it's not like I spend any time of my day thinking about, like, oh, I really hated Cecilia and Roy's paired ending in Fire Emblem 6. No, I don't think about that. I just don't think about the endings that I don't like. I don't think about Xander and Corrin, you know, I just don't think about ones that I think are weird. The problem is, Heroes wants me to think about it, so I just get more annoyed by, like, proxy. Especially the recent Attune Micaiah. That one was awful. That one made me pretty fucking mad. And the duo unit that makes me real mad. The other problem with South also has to do with Micaiah. You know, you get to things such as, I think I like South and Path of Radiance better than Radiant Dawn, but if there was only Path of Radiance South, I don't think I would put him this high, if that makes sense. You know, there's aspects of South I really like. So I really like, you know, like the fact that he kind of takes over Ike's role as being like the, you know, commoner who, you know, because of circumstances like a war breaking out in his country, he has to like kind of become a leader he never expected to be. I like, you know, his conversation with Sephirin at the end of the, you know, in the endgame, Tower of Guidance, when he's like, look at you like an ordinary boy at the end of the world. That's, you know, there's stuff like that. I really like that about South. I really like his support with Astrid is fantastic. Support with Tormod is fantastic. I love his relationship with Tormod. You know, in part 1 of Path of Radiance, he was kind of like the guy who was a little out of his depth, kind of introducing Micaiah to all of these things. He was like, yeah, I was just like a guy during all of this, but I did witness it, and I know all of these people. So I think that that's like interesting, is Micaiah's like, well, you know, you have all these amazing adventures with these people. I also like the, you know, kind of conflict between Soth and Micaiah in part 1, when Soth is the one who's like, yeah, Ike's the best person ever. Micaiah's like, well, you know, it's hard because I didn't know Ike personally, but literally his army is like the reason like we're suffering so badly now, obviously. Like none of us really like Ashnard, like none of us like Ashnard. But things, you know, we are suffering a lot right now because, you know, both Alencia and Ike as a force, you know, Crimea as a nation, the way that they handed it over to Benyon directly kind of started all of everything that was going on in Dayan, like all the prison camps and, you know, like people being killed in the streets. So like, I think that's such an interesting thing, and I like that Soth is like, understandably, like, I worship Ike. I think he's the best guy ever. I want to be just like him, and he did become just like him. So I think that that's cool. I also think he's funny. I like his personality. Again, my only 2 real problems with Soth kind of come from how much Radiant Dawn just like, obviously, I don't think, I think that it's great that Soth cares so much for Micaiah. If I could tweak Radiant Dawn, I don't necessarily know if I would take it out. Obviously, I don't like it at all, but I would make their paired ending like not default, like from the beginning. Because, you know, I don't really want to take things out, but I would, because I know people enjoy them, if that makes sense. Like, I was saying this in my Persona 5 review. I don't think the adult woman, teenage boy romances, people enjoy those. So I'm not going to be the person who's like, they should be removed, they should never be in the game. Because I'm like, well, people enjoy them. Not everyone wants the main character to be the main character. They want to play as them. And when you're doing things like romance things, you kind of self-insert yourself into that. Yeah, so I don't sit here and I think about, you know, things I don't enjoy. The problem is that because they were like, well, Soth and Micaiah need to have this paired ending, so Soth needs to just kind of act like an idiot when he's around Micaiah, if that makes sense. But Micaiah doesn't act like an idiot around Soth. Like, the one time that she, like, made a decision because of him, it was literally because he was being dangled above a cliff. The problem with Soth is that in Path of Radiance, he cares so deeply about the people around him. And even in part 1, he's like, you know, this is my country, I don't want to see people suffer. That's, you know, that's very noble, and that's, you know, one of the reasons why I thought, like, his base conversations with Ike and Dayan, and then, like, his, you know, support with Astrid was interesting. Because he seemed to be very in tune with, you know, like, what sort of things the common man is suffering with. And so I was like, wow, Soth is such an empathetic young man. And then my problem is in Radiant Dawn, when he's kind of introduced to, like, the blood pact thing, he's like, I'm just gonna take Micaiah and run. I don't give a fuck if the rest of Dayan dies. And I was like, you know, that was one of the things that really bugged me. I was like, how do you go through this entire thing and you're so stubborn? And it just felt like his character had changed so quickly, because he just came across as very selfish when he did stuff like that. I'm like, well, why would you act like that? You know, it's stuff like that he was like, well, you know, it doesn't matter as long as Micaiah's okay and we're together. I don't give a fuck if other people die. And I'm like, okay, that literally was like the complete opposite of how you felt. So it's stuff like that that really bugged me about Soth. You know, the other major gripe, and I feel like this is less like a specifically Soth thing and more of a, you know, Fire Emblem at this time, this, you know, era of Fire Emblem writing just did this a lot. Soth, like, speaks for Micaiah all the time, and that really bugs me, because it's not like I think that it's great that Soth criticizes Micaiah because he's kind of in the position of being, you know, like her little brother, that he's like, we're family, like I can criticize you. I think that that's great. When he was like, Micaiah, I don't know what the fuck you're doing helping, you know, Benyon right now. And she's like, well, you know, I have to do what King Tellius says. You know, I'm a general. Even though I don't believe in this, you know, I don't want to doubt the king. You know, like Dayan just became a thing. This is what the Dayan citizens want. It's not what I want. And Sofu was like, you know, I am kind of disgusted with your actions right now. Same with like Jill. I thought those were great. I think that it's great that they criticized her. What I don't like is Soth speaking for Micaiah like all the time. If you go and like you read like all of the scenes, it's like Soth will say something, and like at least half the time Micaiah will either, she'll like immediately disagree, like Soth stop. Like we know that like some of the things is she's like, Micaiah doesn't want that. We know that Micaiah wants that. So it's just like, it comes to things like Hubert. You know, like there's his whole support with Edelgard and his whole support with Ferdinand. That shows that like that is legitimately supposed to be a character flaw of Hubert's. That he like kind of makes decisions for Edelgard and says like, you know, I'm making this decision because, you know, Edelgard doesn't want to do the hard thing, but I'll do the hard thing for her. That, you know, because that's regarded as like a direct character, you know, flaw of Hubert's, and because of that, you know, that's like that's why I think like that trait of Hubert's doesn't like bug me. It bugs me with Soth because like, you know, I never got the vibe that that's like something we're supposed to be mad, like annoyed that Soth is doing. Or like, look at, you know, he's so diligent, he's so caring. I'm like, well, he's just being kind of annoying by doing that. And Radiant Dawn, after a certain point, you just kind of don't get a lot of like what was so like memorable about Soth in Path of Radiance, and you just kind of get him like, I do have issues with him, but because I like him enough, it doesn't bog him too far down. But I have days where I get very annoyed and I would probably put him lower, but it's not that bad. I think what's good about him does outshine the bad. It's just the bad does get on my nerves. So that's Soth. Let's do Micaiah's other sibling, Saniki. She's probably going to be at the top of memorable, really love. Maybe bottom of faves. I'm going to probably keep her here though. Saniki. I love Saniki. I think that I think the child ruler trope can be badly done at some points, but I think when it's really well done, it's an interesting trope. So I think my favorite Zelda character is Riju, and she's very similar to Saniki. She, you know, she was put on the throne like way too young, and you know, because of that she's had to be a little precocious and like almost arrogant to a fault, because you know, you think about like childhood development, being told that you're so important so young probably gets you a really big ego. And I actually like that Saniki is like kind of like an asshole when you first meet her in Path of Radiance. I think that's really fun. And you know, like she's trying her hardest to do all she can in her situation, and you know, the whole thing with the Apostle bloodline. Literally my favorite plot in this entire game is the Apostle plotline with LaRon and Altina and Saniki and Micaiah and Misaha and all of the other apostles like Yoram. Yeah, Saniki is because she's such a good counterpart to Micaiah too, as somebody who's like grew up with everything but was not blessed with like this gift, so she feels inadequate. She's like, literally the reason I was like born and made an empress was that I was supposed to talk to the goddess, and I suddenly meet somebody who has all of my gifts and it makes me feel so inadequate. That's so interesting, because then you have Micaiah, who is like, you know, obviously she was probably born in wealth, but she does not remember it. We don't know how old she was when the Cernus Massacre happened. I'm willing to bet around 3 or 4, just because, you know, that's early enough that you probably wouldn't remember much. But also, the way she describes this, she's like, oh, there was an old lady who just looked after me. I'm like, okay, but if you were an infant, you'd probably have, you know, especially when you think about childhood development, you would probably view that person as a mother. And because she doesn't view that old woman as like a mother to her, she's like, this person just like made sure I ate. You know, that makes me think more that like she was a little bit older, because I think that plotline is so interesting, and Saniki creates such an interesting contrast with Micaiah. I really, really like Saniki. I'm kind of convincing myself to put her in top tier. What else? What else about Saniki? Yeah, I think that because she, you know, like, there's the whole thing that, like, you know, Micaiah became a leader of Dayan because the Dayan people chose her. Saniki was chosen for Benyan, but, like, rose up to the occasion. So that's interesting. I think that Saniki kind of, like, being like, well, I can't speak to the goddess, but because she's such an effective leader, very young, and she's like, I want to expose the slave trade, I want to expose the corruption of the Senate, I do not want Benyan to be what it was, I want to follow in my grandmother's footsteps. You know, I really like the precociousness of Saniki, and, you know, how it manifests in both positive and negative. Negative in, like, her personal life, that she doesn't really have friends, and she's very abrasive to many people. It's also, like, she has an interesting relationship. I think her relationship with Ike is very funny, like, her friendship. She's, like, it's, like, really funny. They're, like, kind of always, like, yelling at each other. I find that really funny. She's like, stop your moping. He's like, my face always looks like this. My face always looks like this, Apostle. And he's like, well, I have nothing to do with this. She's like, no, we're gonna do that. You know, we're gonna make you a noble. And he's like, no, I don't want to do that. You know, I think that that's a very funny dynamic. So, Saniki is memorable. We might move her up. Sephirin. One of my favorites. I love Sephirin. I think his story is so sad. It is so sad, yet he still remains, like, a really interesting character. So I think that it's kind of, how am I, okay, I'm not gonna name names. Sometimes when characters in their entire plot lines are tragic, you're like, that's really sad, but, like, there's literally nothing else to their character. Sephirin kind of defies that by still being a very interesting, funny character. One, I think that his ideology is very, like, at some point, I kind of agree with it. I look at some of his conversations in, you know, his boss conversations, I'm like, he's got a point. He's also very funny. Like, I think all of his Path of Radiance conversations, you're like, this guy's fucking weird. So, you know, like that last conversation where he just starts laughing at Ike. I'm very verbose about some of these. And then some of these, when I'm getting down to some of my favorite characters, I'm like, what am I supposed to say? It's Sephirin. You know, I think his tragedy is very interesting. Especially, like, the, you know, conversation with Misaha, which I think is literally my favorite scene in, like, both games. With being, like, you know, like, hundreds of years have gone by, but, like, because I met you, I feel like I have a purpose. You know, like, the whole plot line with, like, parents sort of, like, giving up parts of themselves to have children, you know, with Grail and Almeida. I feel like Sephirin's, like, the #1 example of that. And because he was, like, so, like, my life has purpose, I'm so happy, not only has my bloodline kind of inherited the powers, they have such a noble goal, like, we have the same goal as far as, like, ending Lagu slavery, and to the tragedy of, like, sensing that, and then suddenly having it ripped apart, that is, like, oh, I think as somebody who really likes tragedies, that is, like, so upsetting, but so interesting. I like his relationship with Saniki. I think that that's, like, a very beautiful sort of, you know, like, flawed father-daughter dynamic, because on some level, she is, you know, she is part of his bloodline, so he does genuinely love her. At the same time, I have to think, on some level, he's like, she's not going to replace Micaiah, you know, because Saniki's like, I feel inadequate, I literally can't speak to the goddess. Like, Sephirin's like, I only told you one lie ever, and I have to wonder if it was like, you will speak to the goddess one day, or something like that. And, like, kind of knowing that she never will, like, kind of have that apostle power. Because, like, you know, and I feel bad for kind of insinuating that Sephirin doesn't love Saniki as much as he loved Micaiah, but, like, he did say if Micaiah had lived, he would have never, like, done any of the things he did. But, like, literally because he wasn't willing to do that because of Saniki. And it's, like, really sad. On some level, I wonder how much Sephirin, like, kind of in the back of his mind wanted to fail. Because I don't think he wanted Saniki to die. Because he went and, like, he rescued her from, like, house arrest. So Saneki was rescued from house arrest, and he was like, I'm so thankful. You know, he seemed genuinely thank Nisala for saving Saneki. Also on the same level, like, as Prime Minister of Benyon, he did bring about a lot of positive social change. Like, he was a very popular Prime Minister. He was actively, like, trying to sabotage, like, the Senator's plans. I don't think, if he truly did not care about the world, I don't think he would have done any of that. Like, he wanted humanity to prove him wrong. I don't know. I think that that's an interesting thing. I'm like, so I think that because I'm still, like, thinking about that and I'm still stewing on it, he's one of the best characters in this game. You know what? I'm gonna put him behind Ike before Tabarn. I really like Sephirin. I think because he's such a hard person to pin down, but, like, I can't just be like, he's evil, you know, but he has done stuff I do not agree with. Like, I think two things that I'm like, well, I literally can't defend you about this, Sephirin. It was two things. It was working with Azuka and giving Lilia over to, King Ashnard. Try to, like, get her to do the Galder of release. That's the two things that I'm like, you know, if you're sad about your entire race being killed, why would you give over the last remaining person to, like, Ashnard, a very famous, like, terrible person? We'll just keep it at that. So there's kind of two things I give Sephirin shit for, and it's those two things, but at the same time, I'm like, I literally can't kind of blame him for getting nihilistic. His pride as, like, a member of the Heron race, and, like, his apostle bloodline with Altina are both wiped out in, like, the same, like, week. So, you know, I find Sephirin to be, like, an endearingly, like, interesting character. I'm very conflicted by a lot of the things he did. And I think that that's interesting. I think he's such a good villain. Antagonist. I don't even know if I'd call him a villain, even though he did things that I would find pretty reprehensible. You know, one of my favorite conversations in the entire game is Ike saying to Sephirin, you know, sometimes it's enough. Wanting to do a good thing is enough. Sometimes how you feel is more important than how you act. Again, I don't feel like Radiant Dawn is a game that's very, like, sort of like people have to die in order for, like, things to happen. You know, besides, like, obviously Rajayan, and, like, there is such a strong sense of hope. I used to have the stance that I think it'd be better for Laurent to die. But I'm like, no, I think that that's very contradictory to, like, the message. Is that, you know, life will return, you know, dawn will come. Sometimes things have to be worse than how they are because there is better in the future. Sephirin is a great character. Zelgius, my second favorite character in the entire game. Because Zelgius, I think, to me, is kind of exists on, you know, I don't think he has the characters that I would say this about. I would say, like, they have at least some sort of, like, not, like, literally split personality disorder, but, like, some sort of, like, two aspects of how they live their life. There's, like, kind of two states they live in. Zelgius seems to me to be the same sort of noble person living on two sides of, like, life, if that makes sense. So I don't think his personality ever changes, but his stance changes. You know, he is the general for Benyon, but he's also the Black Knight. So he's also, you know, somebody who does seem to do things and genuinely, like, want things to be better, but he's also working with Sephirin to try to, like, end the world. There's one, you know, a lot of people say, like, I think that, like, the reveal that, like, Zelgius was the Black Knight was very anticlimactic in Radiant Dawn, but in the Japanese version, you're supposed to find out the beginning of part 3. Branolf pretty much figures it out immediately. You know, there's other parts, like part 3 of Radiant Dawn is so good. Kind of characters I end up really liking are characters that you go through and you try to, like, figure out how they're really feeling. So you have to, like, go through it multiple times and be like, okay, is this how they were feeling? And I think because Zelgius, like, shows up, and also I think at one point there's, like, a chapter when he's fighting in one chapter, And then that night, he's like going to help Micaiah. And then the next morning, he's fighting again and has to do a long march. And you're like, this guy has so much fucking stamina. And he had to use warp powder, which is something that would exhaust a normal person. And he's just like shrugging it off. The other thing about Zelgius is that he's just fucking cool. He's like tanking things. And you're like, this guy, with my brain small, my meat huge, and my pain endless, I tread onwards. So like part 3 of Radiant Dawn is like one of my favorite, like that is what I am obsessed with. Like the central kind of triad of Ike, Zelgius, Micaiah, and like kind of how they keep interacting with each other and how they like, you know, we as an audience know things, but they don't know things about each other. I really like his relationship with Ike. I think to me, it kind of has uncle vibes, if that makes sense. One thing that reminds me of Zelgius and Grail is, this sounds like such a reach. I feel embarrassed saying it. It's Yoruichi and Soifang from Bleach. You know, that part when Soifang is like, you know, I looked up to you, I worshipped you, and you left. And then she just kind of breaks down crying, and she says, why didn't you take me with you? You know, you went through chapters of Soifang talking about how much she despised Yoruichi for like, you know, like, oh, I'm better than you. You thought you were the greatest, and you taught me all of this. And the apprentice has become so much better than the master. But then, like, at one point, she just, like, literally can't handle it. And it's, like, breaks down. And it's, like, literally, why didn't you take me with you? Sorry for reaching. That might be a little fanfiction-y. That kind of really reminds me of Zelgius. I don't know. When he's, like, you know, this is, like, the, like, point of my life. Is I love serving under Commander Grail. And he's, like, I'm so sad that I'm going to have to leave. So the fact that Grail left first is, like, interesting. And then suddenly, like, you know, I think I described it as grinding so hard for the final boss and then you one-shot him. It's like he grinded for 20 years. He's like, I'm going to be better than Grail. I'm going to have this amazing fight. And he, like, one-shot Grail. And he's like, is that it? There's nothing? There's no resistance? Except for in saying that was Zelgius just, I didn't tell him to do that. He just kind of did that because he wanted to. I think I'm, like, one of the only people who ships Zelgius and Grail, but I do. So, because Zelgius gets to, like, live out that fantasy of finally being able to, like, meet Grail at his prime through Ike, and how he's like, I feel like my life is, like, fine now. Again, I've said, why, it just doesn't feel fair that Zelgius has to die. And I just don't feel like feels not analogous to, because even Ike was, like, upset. Ike was like, I think in the Japanese version? Maybe in the English. Yoon's like, Ike, are you happy you won? He's like, I think I'm happy and sad. Because he was like, you were my last teacher. And, like, Ike gets to live out his, like, kind of, like, apprenticeship, like, wanting to be stronger. To be as strong as his dad through Zelgius as well. So, you know, like, that's an interesting relationship there. He's just cool, Path of Radiance. I'm trying not to forget anything. Yeah, his past with Sephiroth is very, very beautiful, very sad. I like that a lot. Zelgius is an interesting character. He's also, like, straight up, like, very compassionate. You know, we can see, like, obviously he, like, one-shots Grail. That's not great. On another level, we see that he's actually very compassionate. Like, when Ashnar tells him to kill Ina, he doesn't. Zelgius, on some level, I think kind of exists in, like, sort of like that. If you look back and you see his actions, he's more compassionate than you think he would be. So I think that that's an interesting aspect of him. You're like, this guy's, like, kind of very noble and nice, and you understand why somebody like Leviel would simp hard for him. Editing me here, when I was editing Micaiah's voiceover, I realized I didn't like any of it. So I was like, well, I think I have to throw this whole thing out and re-record it. Most of this has been off the cuff, but this one I did write bullet points because she is my favorite, so I did want to make sure that I knew what I was going to talk about and I didn't forget anything. So Micaiah is my favorite character, and there's a lot of aspects about her as a character that really, you know, not only endears me to her, but makes her one of my favorites. As I said before, I think the Apostle storyline with Laron is probably one of my favorite parts of the entire game. So, you know, how she connects to that and how she continues that legacy, but in a different way, as opposed to Saniki, who does not inherit the ability to speak to the goddess. but does have the leadership qualities. So, you know, like the whole thing that was like, they made the apostle the empress because they did not want Lagus to be leaders of Benyon anymore. So Benyon became a holy empire, and, you know, the apostles became the empresses, but they were like shadow rulers. And it wasn't until Misaha that they took an active role, and same with Saniki, who kind of inherited that, who did not even have that ability to speak to the goddess, but she inherited that will to lead her people. So Micaiah is interesting because she has both of that, but she does not lead Benyon. You know, because she was chosen by the people, she became the Queen of Dayan. It was kind of a role created by Ashnard. You could ascend from knighthood from peasantry under Ashnard. So I think like Micaiah is the good ending of that policy. Micaiah is also interesting because she has that sort of ascension storyline of her like ascending to be goddess of the people, versus like the vulnerability of her as like a human being who lives amongst commoners, grew up among commoners. So there's not only the queenhood aspect, but also kind of, I think it's Soren that says the people of Dayan view her as a goddess. So that also ties into, you know, the title of the game. Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn is Fire Emblem, the Goddess of Dawn, in the Japanese version. And I think that not only means Ashinera, the Dawn goddess, but also Micaiah is viewed as a goddess, and she represents the dawn. There's that kind of interplay there. I'm kind of reminded of Altina's line in Fae that said that Alondine and Ragnell represented heaven and earth, because it's like Micaiah represents sort of that tier above human beings, but also she lives among these people and understands their struggle on a not just sympathetic, but very empathetic way. Characters who have to make tough decisions, and you get different reads on them each time, and you pick up different things each time, are characters I end up really liking. So I think her dark affinity really ties into that. She is kind of, you know, same with her being kind of the same tier as the goddess, viewing Yune as like an older sister rather than like a mother, the way that other people kind of view the goddesses as like their mother. You know, her personal staff, which anyone can use it, but it's definitely intended to be hers. Matrona kind of reminds me of like being the maternal figure of Dayan, and, you know, the people of Tellius by extension. To the point where when she's kind of backed into a corner in late part 3 with the blood pact thing, she does remind me of like, you know, a mother wolf protecting her children, who's like a bit more ferocious when she's backed into a corner. So I think when Engage talked about 313, what they wanted to emphasize with Micaiah's story was resilience. I thought that was like such a beautiful way of doing that. The last thing I wanted to talk about why I think Micaiah is an interesting character is that when I first played Radiant Dawn, again, I didn't play it, I read the script. So I knew what you were supposed to do each chapter, but I wasn't really doing it. I think that Radiant Dawn is worth playing rather than, or at least watching somebody play it like a streamer. I think it's worth the gameplay and plot integration in Radiant Dawn is so strong. Because the Dawn Brigade sucks and Micaiah is leading such an uphill battle, I think that Radiant Dawn is worth playing to be in Micaiah's shoes, because you understand how much of an uphill battle that she's fighting, and she's barely winning, and, you know, they're doing things like, you know, the maps are like guerrilla warfare and sneaking through the streets and all of those sort of things. They're not traditional battles in a Fire Emblem game. It's not a traditional army, so your units kind of suck. And that's what I find so I think that Micaiah's mindset to me of somebody who has to go through such hard trials. I also neglected to mention this before. Part 3 is such an interesting part of the game because you switch between armies, and fighting your own units is so good. It's what I wanted from Three Houses, and it makes Radiant Dawn all that more memorable and special. Anyway, Micaiah is my favorite character. She's one of the best characters of all time. I love her. She's amazing. And she is how I'm going to end this video off. So thank you so much for listening. I think I have an outro sequence recorded, but I appreciate you listening to me, and I have a lot more videos of Tellius planned. I don't know how much I have for other Fire Emblem games, but at least Tellius, I have a few videos planned for that. So thank you so much. It was really fun talking about this game. So thank you for listening. Bye bye.